Either way, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like everything is copacetic, so we are good to go by the looks of it. Excellent. So give me 1 second. Let me move this around real quick, since I shouldn't need too much more. All right, cool. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long time since we've done one of these, let alone since we've done one of these live. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the channel or one of the newer faces from one of the response videos, every so often, the regulars over in the live stream bully me into watching a variety of stuff that's usually outside of my normal purview. So a decent amount has been sitting in the docket for a while now, and since that we finally reached the credits of Xenoblade 3, though admittedly not done with it yet, I've got DLC and post-game to see to on that. It's still going to be a regular fixture. But since we hit the credits, that seemed to be enough of a difference to say, alright, let's break this out for a bit of variety. I'm already throwing Baldur's Gate 3 in on Thursdays at what'll eventually be a regular stream time, so may as well lean into it for that. So, that in mind, that's what these are typically for. So, I'm going to be shaking it up with this one, though, because I want to try something out. I don't know how well it'll work out, but you know what? Worth a shot. And to explain what I'm referring to, let's do a bit of trivia about how computers can work sometimes. Because if you've ever watched another streamer struggle with getting their webcam to show up in both OBS and Discord, what's going on in those cases is that there's an eccentricity of USB video where if you're trying to get it to work in one application, for whatever reason, it just does not like cooperating with you when it comes time to be used by a second application. Usually it can only be consumed by one spot, and then it's just that. So, the reason I say this is, in order to do what I'm about to do, I have to have more than one OBS window open, because then I can do this. Hello. Yes, I have it muted. I have OBS's preview audio muted so I can run around and do this. See if I can manage to be transformative with what's on the docket while still shaking up the visual component, let's put it that way. Especially since what it'll allow me to do is then go over here and say, now that I have hit the credits on this game, I go over here, I've got the hard modes that I need to try out, and that'll probably be what I focus on for tonight. Actually, you can't see that. Let me get rid of the upper left corner. So, I've got these I need to try out in order to see how well that's going. And eventually, once I'm back on stream, I'll need to deal with all these, but for now, my thought was, you know what? I'm probably not going to do too much to showcase these because it takes me something like 40 minutes in order to knock out just this one. So, yeah, this could be a stream unto itself. So, my thinking is, rather than stress about when or if to do this on stream, may as well just do it as part of a React night, right? So, I'll have a bit of my screen occupied by what we'll be reacting to, and if I need to, I can just full screen it if it ends up being too much of a distraction. That's the plan anyway. So, that in mind, let's go ahead and see to the first game on the docket. So, as you can see, it's my channel called Nintendo Forecast. This was something recommended over in the Discord. If you ever want me to watch something, whether it be for a raw reaction like this or a response video, you can throw them over there. So there's a Discord link in the description, and there's a React submissions page where you can add that in. There's no guarantee that I'll watch it, and I think there was one thing that's expected, that was expected from Gilgamesh that we are not going to be getting to tonight, and we'll get to why later on. But let's see what's currently on the docket. So, when franchise revivals fail. So this topic immediately stood out to me purely because of the subject matter. Because for those of you unaware of what the game is in the background here, Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, bit of an awkward name, but effectively this was a remaster of, no EK64, sad. You'll see why in a moment, Gilgamesh. So the reason why, if you're unfamiliar with this game, it is a remaster of the first two Advance Wars games, which were effectively Nintendo's gambit to see, okay, if we actually put out a turn-based strategy game like this, which won't take as much localization work as a Fire Emblem game, will there be actual interest in it? Because I think around this time you also had Marth and Roy show up in Melee, and that also generated interest. And because of that, there was curiosity to say, okay, will these work? And funnily enough, the 4 Advance Wars games that ended up existing ended up doing a lot better in the Western market, basically anywhere that wasn't Japan, which is also why they stopped making them, because intelligence systems were feeling a bit demoralized on that count. Because even now, a lot of Japanese media is and Japanese media companies are very much focused on, okay, what is the local market like? And if the rest of the market likes it, great, free money. And honestly, that's probably how they should go about it, because otherwise you get games like Forspoken, but that's beside the point. So I'm not too familiar with the channel at hand, so we'll see what he has to say for himself. But I'll be curious to see what tact he takes, because the remaster came out. They call it a reboot. I prefer the term remaster since the gameplay is basically virtually indistinguishable from it. Well, the only real difference is the visual component. So, and a couple script changes, one of which I despise, but that's beside the point. So, because of that, that was my reminder to shut off Steam, apparently. Okay, you are getting out of here. Why is it defaulting to that monitor? I'm starting to see why all of my Linux games keep going to the wrong monitor if they're native Linux ports. Either way, me getting distracted by that aside, let's see, where was I? So, when this remaster came out, it ended up not doing well, though I would chalk this up to the fact that they had some hype going into it, at least so far as I could tell, around the time they announced it. And if they had gone with their original plan to release it, I think summer 2023 was it? It probably would have done fine, though I'd be curious to know how well it did, because they ended up delaying their plans because it would have come out within days of Ukraine being invaded. So a real world modern military setting, Nintendo decided to be very gun-shy about that, especially since I think the first game released within a couple days of 9/11. So reboot was for the pun. I am well aware, still a clunky name. Still a very clunky name. You would have just been better off calling it Advance Wars 1 and 2 Remastered. Or rebooted. You don't need, you lean too much into the bit and it can end up being clunky. That's my point. Either way, so, that in mind, that is what I would primarily chalk up to the reboot not doing well. Well, remaster anyway. More so that the hype died for it, and the fact that the Japanese market, to my knowledge, was hardly even aware of its existence. I don't believe they marketed it at all. Even in the Nintendo Direct that announced it to the Western market, I think there was a different game in place in Japan. I haven't confirmed that, so don't take that as gospel, but that's my understanding of things. So, we've got a lot to sink into for this, so I'll be curious to see what all takes place there. So, let's go ahead and boot things up and be on our way.
What does the latest interview with WayForward's James Montana signify for the future of Advance Wars?
Okay, already you're having me curious, because if you're sourcing directly from an interview, okay. Alright, I'm curious now. So, if you're already looking to what people are saying, well, alright, let's take a look.
Or indeed other titles from the California-based Nintendo.
Before I get too far, let's put closed captioning on as well. Alright, let's reboot that back over here.
What does the latest interview with WayForward's James Montana signify for the future of Advance Wars, or indeed other titles from the California-based Nintendo collaborator? Is Advance Wars a series with a future, or a textbook example of how franchise revivals can go badly wrong? Let's investigate.
Well, again, I wouldn't necessarily blame Nintendo for how things shook out with that, though I suppose time will tell as to whether he has any insider information or anything of the sort to discuss things further.
One of the underrated gems of the last few years, Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp has had, to say the least, a troubling history. Originally slated for late 2021, it was pushed into 2022, and then, because of global circumstances, Nintendo made the decision to delay it indefinitely.
Yeah, pretty much. It was marked as indefinitely. In practice, it ended up being approximately a year, I believe, from when it had been planned.
The choice was sensible in some ways, given the sensibilities of the time, but it also associated the game with real-world conflicts in a way that was problematic, and it meant there was never really going to be a good time to drop it.
Yeah, and that is the risk you play. Honestly, in hindsight, it probably would have made more sense for them to just say, you know what, there is the association, but I mean, look at the aesthetic in front of you. Here, let me make sure that I can show it to you properly. I mean, look at that aesthetic. You really gonna think that we're gonna pull legitimate military strategies from a game that looks like this? You should have just leaned into the fact that, hey, yeah, it's modern military. We didn't anticipate this. Unfortunate, but you know what? We're just here to make a fun game and create a fun game for you all to enjoy so that you don't have to necessarily think about that. If you're the one thinking about that, that's your problem. But at the same time, this is Nintendo we're talking about. This franchise is cursed when it comes to real-world events.
The time they chose was almost deliberately as inauspicious as
That's the
possible
wrong one.
in April 2023.
Okay, hang on. How the hell did that end up? Oh, I see. Okay, I see what went wrong. Okay, I clicked the wrong thing. Sorry about that. Let's rewind him a bit.
Never really going to be a good time to drop it. The time they chose was almost deliberately as inauspicious as possible in April 2023, a few weeks after Metroid Prime Remastered, but a few weeks before Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and Pikmin 4.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
In an absolutely hype bomb period, it was really eminently overlookable, and indeed was overlooked.
You know what? That's also a fair component of this, because you've got two major games you have to worry about for that. So, and honestly, we'll even be talking a decent amount about Tears of the Kingdom tonight, in case you looked at what's on the docket according to what's on my Brave tabs, but we'll see to that in a moment.
There are also some signs that production was not entirely smooth sailing.
Oh.
A tester who worked with WayForward anonymously spoke to YouTuber Mangs and reported quite a few concerns from issues we have heard separately about people with red badges feeling like second-class citizens to slow response times from Nintendo and WayForward when many crashes and issues were reported. This surely accounts...
Okay, so full disclosure, I'm not a fan of Mangs, because I believe he was accused of impropriety a while back, which he copped to, and then was seemingly allowed to continue on as normal. But I can't recall the exact veracity of the claims, so we will just discard that for the moment. If the information is good, then the information is good. But if there is rumblings regarding something serious that's going on, alright, so take it with a grain of salt, because it is insider information. There's no telling how true it is, though. Given that Nintendo is still very Japan-centric in a lot of ways, outside of maybe Pokemon titles and their localization studios, it would not at all be surprising if this were the case. So we'll have to see more before we make a definitive statement there.
Counts for the delay out of 2021. Look, testing is a necessary part of the video game process, something Nintendo usually focuses on hugely to make sure that even if they do occasionally put out games which feel a little content thin, they almost never feel buggy, and indeed, they issued an apology for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet having so many issues when that game launched. However...
Well, to be fair, in Nintendo's case, they aren't the sole owners of Pokemon either. I think it's a third Game Freak, a third... Let's see. So Game Freak is a completely separate entity before I say anything else. So Pokemon itself, I think, is what? A third Nintendo, a third Game Freak, and a third some other third party? If memory serves. So... not entirely Nintendo's fault, although it is still seen as a Nintendo property. They certainly make a lot off of the name, so entirely fair to give them grief for how things turn out.
Extra testing does add to cost on what presumably was a very low-budget title for Nintendo. The tester, known only as Anvil, also offers his view about how well the game sold. I think it's clear that Anvil has some bitterness, and the fact that he is anonymously speaking on an internet forum in breach of his non-disclosure agreement suggests that there may be some level of resentment or disillusionment motivating his decision, but nevertheless, his assessment may also hold some value. He says that he was let go a year early and so did not hear how it sold, but he said, and I quote, "I do know there is general disapproval of the game's overall performance."
That would not be surprising at all, given the circumstances, though, again, I wouldn't necessarily blame Nintendo. I would more so blame, okay, real-world events that you decided to respond to in a sense that was likely unwise in hindsight. That I would chalk up to the circumstances more so than anything that Nintendo explicitly did wrong.
But considering the franchise's history and the curse it holds, a part of me feels they don't care. Okay, so...
Well, I mean, to some extent, they don't care because they've got a lot of other franchises. It was very much giving it the good old college try. And if it worked, it worked. If it didn't, so be it. It was very much a matter of saying, all right, well, it's very much liked in the Western world. We are still very much a Japan-centric company, so, we'll see it. We'll let WayForward handle it. We're not going to worry about it too much. Not going to even market it in Japan, so, I mean, yes.
General disapproval is really so vague that it's difficult to quantify, and I don't know that Nintendo in Japan would see any kind of curse attached to Advance Wars. I certainly hope not anyway, although I imagine he's referring to the fact that one of the previous Advance Wars games released in September 2001.
Uh-huh.
Realistically though, Nintendo will be well aware that circumstances meant that Advance Wars never had a fair crack at benefiting from the Switch effect this time out. He does also point out the game was released very late in Japan and was not even given physical copies, which only complicates the unit calculations. To quote,
Wait, really? See what I mean about it not being valued in Japan? They don't care about it.
a Reddit post, they sent this game out to die. They released the game 2 weeks before Tears of the Kingdom was set to come out. With the lack of advertising and the constant delays, lack of communication with the players, and the ongoing conflict, it was destined to fail. All of that is true, however, what I will say is that the Japanese digital-only release is interesting. Not all franchises appeal equally to all parts of the world.
Yeah.
Pikmin is, proportionate to its size at least, far bigger in Japan compared to the West.
That's unsurprising given the aesthetic.
Metroid and even Zelda have a far bigger ratio of their audience in the West than in Japan, and Advance Wars definitely falls into the latter category. Bypassing a physical release is surely a sign of a huge lack of confidence in the title, but it also means that Nintendo gets to maximise profitability as online sales are more valuable to Nintendo.
Well, even so, Metroid is Metroid. You have a certain degree of name recognition pretty much everywhere in the world, even if it's not, the most popular franchise Japan is concerned about, as opposed to Mario or Zelda, or any number of other weeb shit, to be fair. Or any number of just weeb shit in general.
In this sense, acknowledging that Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp had already been hobbled out of the gate, particularly in Japan, it kind of makes sense for them to say, let's not throw good money after bad with a physical release, but try to maximise the profits on the units we do sell. Frankly, I kind of wish they'd bypass the physical copies at all. One of the reasons I suspect Famicom Detective Club was so quickly brought back was the fact that it was being sold digitally, and so even if its overall sales were low, probably not that low given the popularity of visual novels and adventure games in Japan, but still relatively low, the actual profit per unit would have been rather high.
I don't know if we necessarily want to be encouraging this, because I do find myself missing missing physical PC games, because you don't necessarily want it to all be digital, because at that point, well, I mean, let's be honest, Nintendo isn't going to drop their prices, so it is more profitable for them to go that route, but you don't want them to wholly abandon it, because otherwise game preservation for older titles becomes even harder than it already is. So, in that respect, I can understand perhaps from a business standpoint wanting to encourage that, but you don't want to encourage that in actuality. You don't want to end up in the place where Steam is, where you technically don't own any of the games on your Steam account.
Especially since both the remakes and the Emio the Smiling Man follow-up had rather high price points to start with. The same would not have been true of Advance Wars, although perhaps the higher sales in America at least would make it look slightly stronger on the Japanese balance sheets due to the weak yen. Moreover, reception from dedicated Advance Wars fans was mixed for all sorts of reasons.
Two that stuck out immediately, the conflicting visual component between the very, toy-like appearance of the units on the battle map. Actually, here, let me go over to this real quick to show you. You have the toy-like appearance of the battle map, as opposed to the 2D artwork for the portraits and characters and whatnot, which it does not match. That's one thing. The other thing, why the hell did you change the script? You took away my favorite line of the damn game, you bastards. I'm still salty about that. I mentioned it in 2 separate videos because of it. That's how annoyed I am. What was that noise? I'm not sure what you're referring to, Lou.
One refrain echoed by this tester is that the game appears childish. As Anvil says, the overall aesthetic does not match the story, the theme, or the reality that, hello, this is a game about war. Why are you making your war game look so plastic?
Because they're trying to avoid controversy. Next question.
And here, I completely disagree, and I think Nintendo were absolutely right to lean into the toy soldier aesthetic.
No, they should have made everything 2D artwork. That would have been a lot more appealing.
You see, Nintendo is all about tapping into different ways to play. Yoshiaki Koizuma's advice to aspiring developers was to think about play more broadly than just video games. And I think with Advance Wars, it kind of bypasses traditional games and takes us back to toy soldiers on the move, a game that has probably existed for as long as humans have had games of any sort. Obviously, there is a lot of strategic complexity heaped on top of that, but that was always the idea. Now, Advance Wars can actually...
Well, yes, that may be the case, but this is also a visual medium more so than just miniatures on a tabletop. We can do better than that as far as visuals are concerned. You would have been better off just having everything be 2D or leaning into the 3D aesthetic. Entirely. Personally, I think you should have just gone the everything be 2D route.
Be a pretty challenging title, and also, as is to be expected of any narrative based in ideas of war, has some tough themes. Therefore, arguably, the more child-friendly mechanics don't suit its gameplay and its story, but this is still a Nintendo title and it needs to fit their oeuvre. Can
Tell that to Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Nintendo go for a darker, more bleak aesthetic and be successful, at least on a creative level? Self-evidently yes, as
Yes, okay.
anybody who has played Emio the Smiling Man through to the end can attest.
Or Fire Emblem.
But just
not engaged, just ignore that one.
because you can doesn't mean you should. And of course, with Days of Ruin, Nintendo did experiment with a bleaker aesthetic for Advance Wars in the past. Then again, frankly, the narrative of Advance Wars, wherein people gleefully and cheerily enter mass casualty conflicts, doesn't really work on the level of gritty realism. It only works if you view it as a kind of game, and the best way to represent that is through an aesthetic of toy soldiers, a game that's been played by children and adults alike for millennia. And once you follow the logic of that through, you realise that this is not some kind of grim and gritty franchise, and frankly, nor should it be. It's an entertaining tactical experience with a bright story mode and some mascot characters, not some meditation on the harrowing evil of conflict in the world.
Well, even if that is the case, to be fair, it definitely isn't meant to be taken that seriously. I mean, the names of the nations are just stuff like Orange Star and Blue Moon, so it's absolutely not meant to be taken all that seriously, and that is very much clear, though the problem that Advance Wars have is that the writing for it doesn't necessarily bear that out when you look at what's actually being said, because you will have instances where, hey, I'm so gleeful, we won, yay, this is great, we're awesome, but you'll also have moments like Sonya and Lash crossing wits and words, and shells, to be fair, on one of the Yellow Comet missions, well, Gold Comet nowadays, and where it is very much a matter of them taking things very seriously, let's put it that way. And then you'll have missions like the Blue Moon one where Olaf returns to his hometown to find it a wreck. This game can still be very serious. It is very much whimsical in a lot of cases, but it is still very serious in a lot of cases. So, in that respect, I don't think it's necessarily a visual issue with Advance Wars. I feel like it's a writing issue. If you wanted it to have that gritty aspect to it, you should have taken it more seriously from the start. And if you weren't prepared to go down that route, honestly, this is just a writing concern more so than it is a visual one. This shouldn't even be a concern, but the problem is that the writing is schizophrenic on that count.
And here I would draw the comparison with chess. Chess is a simulation of conflict with pieces that are often literally plastic, and that helps because it de-emphasizes the war theming. The fact is forgotten that the game is having you kill bishops, kings, and pawns, an Anglo-Norman word, by the way, for foot soldier, not synonymous with a manipulable and disposable person. These pawns were basically innocent people dragooned in to fight. Indeed, you can focus on the tactics and the actual game of chess, divorced from the original concept of it as a simulation for military conflict.
As do most of us, given the circumstances.
There is definitely a level of disconnect if you think about Advance Wars too much on a narrative level, but fundamentally, where it excels is in the gameplay. Now, there are other criticisms, such as the multiplayer mode, and some people have found glitches. I'm not massively plugged into the
Well, I haven't run into too much when it comes to glitches. I think there was one case where I lost a bit of progress on a turn because of a hard crash, but that was the only major issue I encountered with the game specifically. Honestly, from a testing standpoint, I think I'm trying to think, there isn't too much that I can complain about from a technical standpoint, apart from maybe the occasional hard crash and an occasional issue outside of that. I think there might be some loading issues every now and then, but either way, you're dealing with older hardware. So then again, with the very simple appearing aesthetic, you would expect it to be a little faster than that. It's not as if there's the same detail that you'd get in the Somniel in Fire Emblem Engage.
hardcore Advance Wars community, and while I've seen some really intelligent deconstruction of the game, I've also seen people complaining about the fact that it's called Reboot, but isn't a reboot,
Well, there's me. I am person.
seemingly overlooking the military pun. Clearly, there is a segment of that audience for whom Reboot Camp was, at best, somewhat disappointing.
It is a remaster, call it that, please.
However, it won't surprise long-term viewers of this channel to know I do think this is an excellent package, which I wholeheartedly recommend.
I do recommend it as well. Is this pre-recorded or is he live? I am live. There's your answer. Hello. How you doing?
To any Nintendo fans. With 2 games in it, both superb in their own right, plus level editors and multiplayer options, it's a very rich experience.
Yeah, and from a gameplay standpoint, it's probably the best of both worlds, because the main concern I had going into it was, let me just get this up through here so that's easier to focus on it. So the main thing I was worried about going into it is that I wasn't entirely sure how they would handle the game balance between the 2 games, because they both operate very differently. The character you're seeing in front of you right now, he is utterly broken in the first game, but toned down a little bit in the second. And what they decided to do is, rather than try and, quote, fix the game balance, they just said, okay, preserve things as they were. Max is going to be broken in 1 and less broken in 2. Kanbei is going to be not so broken in 1 and broken in 2. We'll have we'll separate all this out. We'll have the same commanders for the war room as for their specific spots. We'll even be able to throw in a bit of extra content by virtue of that. And honestly, from a gameplay standpoint, I have no complaints.
That's not to dismiss complaints, but I do feel that what we have here is a gift horse and mouth situation. There were years of my life where for various reasons I played fewer video games except for a handful of favourites, and one of those would always be Advance Wars, which I would return to fairly regularly. Seeing any kind of renaissance for the property is a joy, and the idea that people are sleeping on this one because of any kind of perceived flaws really strikes me as letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. Perhaps the biggest controversy here is the toy soldier aesthetic, replacing that classic pixel art, but to me it was a very sensible step, as well as looking quite attractive in an idiosyncratic way.
I disagree on the battle map, but I agree on the character models at least, and the character artwork.
Of course, we don't know for sure how well or how poorly Advance Wars actually did. There are rumours that seem to be viewed very skeptically of it.
Well, the main thing to note is that Nintendo will tell us when a game makes over 1 million on their quarterly report. And so, all we know for certain is that it did not crack the 1 million mark, by virtue of the fact that it was basically not mentioned at all whatsoever. That could just be because it's unremarkable in Japan, as we've been repeating a decent amount, so that could be all it is. But at the same time, it is fair to say that it did not receive a lot of attention relative to what something like, say, as he said, like Metroid Prime Remastered, which came out before it, and then Tears of the Kingdom, which came out within a couple weeks.
Achieving 400,000 sales in its first few weeks, and it topped the eShop charts for a while. However, it didn't reach the threshold of 1 million sales, which would have led it to it being reported to investors.
Oh hey, there you go.
And of course there are other costs such as refunding the advanced sales after the initial delay, which would need to be factored in. Still, there are reasons to be cheerful. A recent interview with James Montana, the game's director, on the Fragments of Silicon podcast revealed some quite interesting tidbits, including how WayForward had courted Nintendo with proposals on a number of occasions with entertaining pitches, but that it was, as he accounts for it, Nintendo who approached them with the proposal of remaking Advance Wars.
I think I remember, if this is the interview I'm thinking of, I remember them being over the moon when they got the chance to work on it. Then, if it was something that came up unprompted, my understanding is that they immediately said, when do we start, basically.
This is something that I'm really pleased to hear as a massive fan of Advance Wars, because I suspect that one of the key drivers of whether a game series continues to get its shot or drops out of consideration is very simply the presence or not of a champion at Nintendo, or at least someone with an interest in the series.
Well, there's certainly enough people in there to have at least someone willing to give it a chance.
In this case, the likeliest person seems to be senior producers with Nintendo's EPD external group in Japan, Toyokazu Nonaka, and the Nintendo of America-based Takao Nakano, who has produced or supported development of several games that were developed with the heavy involvement outside of Japan. Neither seem to be heavily involved on the creative end, but we'll take what we can get. Of course, Montana has definitely not been working on a sequel, as he has a different title in the works for Atari. This is disappointing because traditionally Nintendo's remakes to new title pipeline has always been pretty smooth.
Well, that is assuming that they do well, to be fair, because it looks like you're about to mention Dread. I don't know how well Samus Returns did, though maybe you'll mention that.
Steam went straight from Metroid Samus Returns to Metroid Dread. Mages went from the Famicom Detective Club remakes to Emio the Smiling Man. Of course, both these studios were capable of multiple titles at once, but the specific teams that worked on the Nintendo games seem to have carried straight over. And although their history with Zelda is a bit more complicated than just the two-game dataset I'm using here, you could also point to Grezzo, doing both Link's Awakening and then following right up with Zelda Echoes of Wisdom.
Funnily enough, another game that struggled on the visual component depending on who you talk to. I do have my problems with Echoes of Wisdom aesthetic, and I think it is a little too easy for its own good, and you all saw how I handled Link in the past, so if I'm saying it, you know it's bad. But from a gameplay standpoint, though, it was a neat deviation. I like what they did with it. I hope they continue experimenting like that.
Now, WayForward is a diversified company, but it would be surprising for the same director not to stay on board for the sequel game. Having said that, it shouldn't be a surprise that they moved on from Advance Wars. The game was by all accounts finished by the start of 2022, so WayForward were never going to sit in their hands for an unknowable period, which turned out to be 16 months before the game released, and Nintendo were never going to greenlight a sequel on a series where they had an as-yet unreleased game in the bag.
Pretty much. And that is the issue you run into when you have a real-world scenario just completely dominate the circumstance, so unsurprising on both counts.
This doesn't preclude Nintendo and WayForward working together at a future point, it just means that the time was not ripe at that particular juncture. The advantages of this kind of arrangement that we saw with Mages, Mercury Steam and Grezzo is that Nintendo gets to use a remake to reacquaint everybody on the project with an older franchise and ensure everyone is philosophically on the same page. And
philosophically is a weird word to use for that, but carry on.
Then they get to move forward to an original project. The great advantage of this strategy is that the first title has costs for building game mechanics and assets, but doesn't have the same cost associated with creating story and creating strong and original gameplay content.
And that is why they reused the aesthetic for Link's Awakening for Echoes of Wisdom, even if personally I wish they had done something a little more detailed, but still, it worked out for what they had in mind, so I suppose I can't complain too much.
While the sequel has the costs associated with developing new material, but can recycle assets and leverage the experience of the development staff. It's a smart move creatively and financially, and I would expect to see this continue. Nintendo may well feel like Advance Wars, which seems like an obvious candidate for this kind of renewal, especially since they themselves initiated the so-called reboot, is unfinished business. Still, assuming a 3-year development window, and since Montana's new game is releasing in 2024, we will be talking about 2027 before a new Advance Wars could potentially release, and even then, the original was designed for Switch hardware not anything more advanced.
Well, to be fair, if it can handle Switch, then in theory it should be able to handle anything that the new Switch is able to do. Although, if the rumors I've heard about mouse functionality end up being true, that's going to be fascinating to see how that factors in, because that's something I noticed coming to this game from seeing to Wargroove on the PC, and just thinking, it's nice to be able to move around the mouse on a grid and be able to have fun with that, and not have to think as much in that respect, so, I am missing my ability to use the mouse. Hell, even being able to take the handheld mode and just use the Switch's touchscreen would have been a major boon. It's something I'm thinking about for a game I'm still in the design phase for. I haven't even put anything to code yet, just trying to get the story figured out right now, but still, it is something I'm thinking about. Oh, they're static? Great. Let me unplug and replug it in. We'll see if that helps. Alright, hopefully that fixes it. Note to self, replace Focusrite. Okay, let's see, is there anything more that I should address in chat while I'm here? Let's see, it's off topic, but you've been waiting for a while. Just saw your video on Jim Sterling, figured it would be the same he turned into a weirdo commentary. However, you pointed out a whole bunch of new and valid observations I never noticed. I was distracted by his increasingly odd behavior and never noticed the genuine decline in his content, but he fell off hard. Well, it's honestly interesting to look at all the comments I've been getting on that, because I'm amazed at the number of people who, had positive experiences with Jim Sterling's content and then look back later and think, what the heck happened? For many different reasons, to be fair. So, the way it's been described, and looking back, I suspect that a lot of the issues that are present now were technically present then, but it was more permissible in that case because video content was much newer and he hadn't gone off the deep end on some other matters we'll be talking about when I address more feedback later in this stream. Either way, back to this.
Being one of the last first-party games on a dying system hasn't always worked out well. Strictly speaking, Alpha Dream's Mario & Luigi Bowser's Fury remake wasn't the last 3DS first-party game, but it did incredibly poorly for a Mario title and seemed to help push the development team off the perch. The fact that added costs would be required to make this work for a sequel system makes me skeptical that it will come. Plus, Nintendo will be aware of the fallacy of sunk costs.
I can't imagine it would be that much more different to code for Switch Switch 2 as opposed to the main Switch. Wasn't that the main speculation for why both Yuzu and Ryujinx were taken out of play? The fact that it likely will be very similar? Heck, I'm pretty sure we don't even have to change our Nintendo Online subscriptions at all, that it'll work between both, that we won't have to worry about making new accounts or anything else like that. And to be fair, with the install base you have, even if there is some technical difference, it probably would be worth it. They did say that not everything would be backwards compatible in the fine print, though that's likely only pertaining to stuff like, say, Ring Fit Adventure, or maybe anything that uses third-party proprietary hardware or something like that. So, we shall see. We shall see. More news on that actually, hang on a minute. It was April 2nd, right? April 2nd. So we'll know in a week and a half, one way or the other. Should be fascinating. Alright, back to this.
Yes, they put a lot into developing Advance Wars, but that doesn't mean it paid off for them. And while rolling a development team straight from a remake title to a sequel, as they did with Mages and Mercury Steam, capitalizes on momentum, that momentum is now clearly dissipated.
That's fair.
There is also the logistical issue of how Nintendo feels about releasing a war-themed title. For sure, I can't imagine any Advance Wars game ever again getting a long hype cycle, because twice now, in September 2001 and April 2023, Advance Wars has ended up scheduled by complete accident against painful real-world events.
It's even worse than that, actually. Hang on. It's even worse than that, because I'm pretty sure the second game released within days of the US invasion of Iraq beginning. If memory serves, because that would have been, I think, 2000... I'm trying to remember the exact timing for that. I was actually alive during that period. Come on, man. Then again, I also was, 6, 7? Somewhere in that ballpark, so... You'll forgive me if my math doesn't math, especially since I'm more distracted by this than I expected. Yeah. Alright, useful experiment, but I think, alright, now that we're done with this, I'm gonna go back to this screen. We're just gonna let this play out.
for a title that is already niche, as it prevents a long build-up and promotion, but then again, compressing the hype cycle into a short window may be beneficial in terms of maximizing bang for the promotional buck.
Oh, there's also mention of Nintendo Labo, however you pronounce that, and also not being compatible. Given the larger screen size, that would make sense, since that it wouldn't necessarily fit the same way. Because, yeah, that makes sense. Alrighty, let me just close down the Switch real quick so I can go back to focusing on this. Alright, cool, that'll do. Alright, we'll stay in this mode for now so I can give this proper attention. I feel like my attention's been more divided than it should be.
So, specifically for Advance Wars, what is the prognosis? For all the flack Nintendo gets for sitting on franchises, and as sympathetic as I am to fans of Star Tropics, Custom Robo, Mother, Eternal Darkness, and Mole Mania, the fact is that by and large Nintendo does have a habit of trying its franchises again and again and again, so the overall likelihood of another Advance Wars title remains high, especially if the system it releases on continues to experience relative success. Then again, the lack of a singular creative force at Nintendo really championing it, the difficulty of scheduling the game, and perhaps once again the lack of a dedicated team of collaborators to push it, is likely to put Advance Wars to the back of the queue in terms of development priorities. The fact that the original games were developed by Intelligent Systems, who do have a financial motive in making sure that there are regular releases of their series, does put it slightly higher, but it's not clear that Intelligent Systems were...
Even then, though, it's been what? Hang on, when did Fire Emblem Engage release? Because it's been a while since we've had a Fire Emblem game. I'm honestly surprised we haven't heard anything. Okay, 23. So, we are due to at least hear about a new Fire Emblem. So, it's honestly kind of surprising they've been so silent about that. Because if memory serves, weren't Engage in Three Houses largely developed alongside each other? That's what I remember. In fact, Engage was supposed to have been done in 2020 by my understanding as a 30th anniversary game. At least that's what the leaks that called this game's existence 6 months in advance claimed.
Were heavily involved in this remake at all, and they've been pretty busy with Fire Emblem, WarioWare, Paper Mario, and that's before we even
Fair enough. Okay, he mentioned it at least.
Consider that they may have their own original titles or titles like Pushmo coming back as well in the future. At this point, I think we're looking at only a 50% chance of seeing another title in this series before the end of the decade.
Well, hopefully Wargroove 3 ends up being good. The way that game ended, it's practically begging for a sequel. So honestly, there are people who will take up the torch, and I think I'd be curious to know how much Wargroove influenced the fact that Advance Wars came back in the first place, because it ended up just doing a decent amount different by the fact that, hey, here's these critical hits, here's a fantasy setting, we're going to shake things up greatly. I've got mixed feelings about how the second one turned out, given how the story went, but still.
For other franchises gearing up for revival, though, I think Advance Wars' apparent failure might be overstated. If you look down the list of where these collaborations with partners on remakes have borne fruit in terms of original games, Grezzo, Mages, Mercury Steam, and arguably even Eighting, who took a far bigger role in Pikmin 4, these partnerships prove successful far more often than not, and Nintendo, by WayForward's own admission, are incredibly choosy and cautious about building and developing these relationships.
I mean, everybody knows how picky Nintendo is and how very careful they are with their IP, at least ever since the CDI disasters.
They took their time, they chose wisely, they crafted an aesthetic for the new title which, I would argue, is right for the franchise, even if it alienated a proportion of the most dedicated fan base, who, let's face it, were mostly going to buy the game anyway.
Fair enough, I was going to buy the game. I mean, somewhere in this computer is my original reaction. Actually, you know what? Hang on, maybe I can dig it up, because I had already planned on using VLC for something. Alright, keep that file manager open. I wonder if it's on here somewhere, because I don't think I ever posted it anywhere. I think there's well, there's more static again. Okay, you're just going to have to live with it, unfortunately. I don't know what's going on. Here, let me fiddle with the volume settings, maybe. The hell? Huh. Although it is going mono right now, I could switch it to the other dock that I don't use very much. But, oh yeah, there it is. Well, I'll play it after this video. We'll let him complete his point, and then I'll reinforce that, yes, the aesthetic might bother me, but I was going to buy this no matter what.
and even the title's original scheduling slot was not prime selling territory. Mid-December, after the Black Friday sales, is not a spot for a title that is going to give Mario Kart 8 a run for its money.
Yeah, pretty much.
They knew it was a niche title, and I'm sure they budgeted and planned accordingly. They did things right, and yet circumstances scuppered them. I don't think this harms Nintendo's underlying philosophy of how to approach remakes, and I don't even think it harms their underlying philosophy of how to approach Advance Wars, beyond being exceptionally cautious about their announcement to scheduling window in future. Personally, as a fan of a number of niche Nintendo franchises, I am really optimistic that we will continue to see not just Advance Wars, Pikmin, 2D Zelda and 2D Metroid, but other franchises being adopted by passionate collaborators outside Nintendo. Star Fox, F-Zero, Wave Race, Donkey Kong Country...
What are they doing with Star Fox anyway? I thought my understanding on that one is that Shigeru Miyamoto has a major controlling hand in that and isn't sure what to do with that. At least that's my understanding. So what are they planning on doing with that?
Country and many more all stand out as having huge potential, and as Nintendo is growing its internal teams, I think there's a lot more potential for these franchises to eventually find their feet either internally or using collaborations. I just really, really hope that Advance Wars continues in that lineup somewhere. Thank you so much for watching.
Fair.
Thank you as ever to my Patreon supporters. Please check out these videos if you're interested in more, and otherwise I will see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.
Alright, decent video then. Okay, so I guess to reinforce his point, let me dig this up, because I think this was my initial reaction that I never posted anywhere, proving that yes, I would have bought this no matter what. Should go to VLC, right? Oh, there it goes. Oh, what's this? What's this? Wait, what? Are we getting Advance Wars? What? Yeah, I think that's all you need to hear. That it took a minute when I was hearing the sound effects, but then I see Orange Star Army and I think, oh, yes, yes, yes. What? You're remastering the old one? I'm not sure I dig the art style, but what? There you go. I think that's all that needs to be said about that particular canard. So, there you go. Alright, decent video. Nice topic to get us started. So, let me go ahead and take a look at chat. I've been ignoring you for a while. Actually, since I don't have the Switch going right now, I can expand the chat window more. Given that I've got an unusual setup right now, is there anything of import that I missed while this was going on? This looks a bit off a wee ball. Hello to you too, Lou. Let's see. Alright, there was the talk about static. I wonder when we'll get a remaster of Pokemon Blue. What, besides Fire Red? Well, Fire Red and Leaf Green anyway, because it was Red and Green over at Japan, so I think that's been the focus. And the closest we've had to that is since then is Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu, so I don't think we'll get anything like that for a while. Apart from that, let's see. Water Blue when? What, is that supposed to be the replacement for Yellow? Yeah, maybe, actually. Here's hoping ZA is good. Something feels off about it in a way I can't describe it. Here's hoping Legends ZA is good. Let's Go is more remake of Yellow? Fair enough. Even so, although, why is it that they backed off on hyper-competitive rivals? Or at least outwardly antagonistic rivals? I mean, unless they changed something with Scarlet and Violet, to be fair, I haven't played it. Because I played Sword and Shield and thought, okay, Babby's first Pokemon game, okay, I'm probably not going to like Scarlet and Violet either. Now let's let everybody else jump in first, and wait, it's a buggy mess? Oh god. And honestly, I'll probably check out Legends ZA at some point. It might be worth streaming on my own time. We'll have to see when it releases, though I got a different game in mind for once I've finished up my Maddening mode run and engage, but that's beside the point. Anything more from chat? Japan does not care for jerk rivals, I heard. Well, too freaking bad. That was the best part. At least in my opinion. I liked having an antagonist like Blue. gives you even extra motivation to beat them down later. Either way, that's beside the point. So, let's see, I did not get my Pokemon ride stuck inside of another Pokemon. Well, I did get my Pokemon ride stuck inside of another Pokemon. Sounds about right. Scarlet and Violet's kind of alright, feels easy. Yeah, and that's the impression I get of a lot of the newer Pokemon games, is that, let me put it this way, when I was playing Platinum a long time ago on an emulator, just to try and get back into it before Sword and Shield released, I ended up losing a couple of battles. And yes, one of them was because I underestimated a Roserade on the second gym, and the other was because of the stupid Garchomp. Barry, well, I like Barry too. Okay. Like part of Barry, let's put it that way. Okay, you were about to get a lot of annoyance at you, Lou. You recovered it, though. You should try reacting to a Maxor video. Oh god, you know what? That is something that I know I will never be able to do, because his videos are literally just ADHD. I do not dare react to a Maxor video because they are just too... Well, honestly, I'd feel bad for doing it. Let's put it that way. Forget me reacting to the Maxor videos, you should just watch the Maxor videos. I'm not gonna take ad rev on him on that count. Either way, next video. These two Hyper Beaties alright, and I can agree to that. Talking about Barry. Plus his battles are easy. That's sort of the point, though. That is the direction they're going with him from a character's standpoint. You could argue it's a bit flat, but still, either way. So, next on the chopping block is Gilgamesh's attempt to make me talk about Trails. Or at least pay attention to it. While I'm still actively wrapped up in another JRPG series that is going to take a while to finish editing. Actually, where am I on the Xenoblade 2 editing? Let's see. Just wrapped up one of the out of order sessions right now, so I've got 27 to still look over. Totaling about 52, well, totaling almost 53 hours of footage I need to finish looking over. It's gonna take a while for me to just finish editing the damn thing, and then there's X right after that. I'm not looking at another JRPG series for a while. That's the point. Anyway, me getting distracted by that aside. So, in the continuing quest to make me pay attention to Trails, Gilgamesh is trying to needle me on that count by saying, hey, here's a channel that you quite like, that's made content that you quite like, talking about the inner workings and the behind the scenes of games and movies that have had trouble development, perhaps. So it ranges from everything from the truly abominable that you've likely heard about, any high-profile failure you may have heard about. You'll hear from him about what went on behind the scenes, presented in a neat narrative. And even for games that are good, like Metroid Prime, you'll get stuff like that as well, where, hey, rocky development history, but look what came out of it. So, that in mind, let's see if he can impress again. Let me turn him down a little bit. Yeah, I get that. Others who have reacted to him couldn't say much other than autism or ADHD in his editing. That is the thing, though. The videos are very good and very substantial. I really liked his videos on Metal Gear Rising and Baldur's Gate 3 especially. They are very nice videos. It's just, well, they are dense as a result. It's an edit a second.
Hello and welcome to another episode of What Happened, the show where we get down and or dirty with the video games, movies, or whatevers that suffered through many stumbles in their long road to becoming things.
What are the others that you've been up to? I should check on their channel. Haven't looked at it in a while.
And today's topic, brought to us by Flophouse Big Boss Jason, certainly suffered through said stumbles. Now to most, The Legend of Heroes sounds like a title spewed through a generic name generator.
Hang on, why is it 360p quality? Come on, fix it up. My internet's not that bad.
But the JRPG series, known more commonly as Trails or Kiseki in Japan, is anything but generic. While it leans into a lot of tropes from role-playing classics of the 90s and early 2000s, it makes it a point to truly embrace its storytelling. Because while many RPGs certainly can be wordy, Trails takes that concept to hitherto unheard of extremes, with many scripts often reaching into the millions and millions of lines of Japanese text.
And this is Japanese text we're talking about here, so oh geez.
Now, the studio behind the series, Nihon Falcom, developed 3 games that made up a specific story arc called The Trails in the Sky, without any real issues, as most of the games took only roughly 2 years to make each.
Man, with that much writing too? Huh. How many writers do you have working on that, and how do you get them all to cooperate?
First, The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky released for Windows in Japan back in 2004, with a subsequent release on the PSP in 2006. It was then followed by the second chapter, its direct sequel, before finishing up with Trails in the Sky the Third, which, while connected to the universe, wasn't integral to the grander plot. Even though Nihon Falcom was not a big player within the Japanese game industry, the quality of the games and their detailed worlds won over a lot of people, building up a fan base through strong word of mouth.
Alright, so the usual way this stuff gets big, so where's the but? You're selling me on a what happened, so that means something had to have happened.
Eventually, this word of mouth reached Western shores, and that's when Falcom started to see potential in releasing the game in other territories.
Oh, is this where the fun begins? Because if you've got that much text, I mean, we had just seen an earlier example in the night where, well, that I had brought up of, hey, we don't know if we want to bring Fire Emblem over to the West because, very wordy, do Americans even like this sort of thing? Because apparently we don't have PCs and don't know about CRPGs, but to be fair, even on PC, that's still very much a niche, even back then, but still, you get the point. And you can't necessarily blame them for not knowing that, given how novel the internet was back then either, but either way, again, beside the point. So, we don't know if our audience would even like this, and give them Advance Wars, see how it goes. Oh, it did well? Okay, give them the Blazing Blade, see what happens. Ooh, pretty.
And it's here where our story starts. It's not about Falcom being crushed by a deadline or having a bigger publisher overmanage their work. It's about the Herculean, twisty, stress-filled, and near tragic tale about the localization.
Oh boy, this is gonna be glorious.
As alluded to before, Western gamers started to become aware of the Trails in the Sky games in the later half of the 2000s, which happened to be around the same time many small localization studios started popping up, with names like Rising Star Games and Ignition Entertainment. The most famous of all, though, and the main player of our story, is Exceed, which
Okay, so I've seen that name around a decent amount. Let's see what you have to say for yourself.
I assume you're all familiar with.
Familiar, though I can't remember what all they've worked on.
Now, amongst all these companies, the Trails games were seen as something of a prestigious series to land, far too small to be bothered with by the likes of Square or Level 5, but big enough to be a hit overseas. Fortunately, Falcom was interested in expanding to other markets, so when Exceed came calling, it was a match made in heaven, before it became a match made in hell. It was all based on the best of intentions, though. The problem came when Exceed actually realized the amount of work that they had signed up for.
And let me guess, contract negotiation trouble?
Their previous localizations were things like Wild Arms, Fragile Dreams, Farewell Ruins of the Moon, and Ju-On the Grudge, the Haunted House Simulator.
Okay, you're overdoing it on the editing, so are you gonna tell us how exactly those are different from Trails then?
None of which properly prepared them for Trails.
Okay, good, thank you.
For those not aware,
I need to remember I'm not watching Jim Sterling.
unlike most RPGs that have shopkeepers or passerbys that say things like this,
Yeah, very basic stuff, I assume.
well, Trails isn't like that at all. Every single character, ranging from the lowliest peasant to the mightiest pharaoh, or in this case king, has their own distinct personality, history, and dozens of lines of dialogue in
I'm starting to see why Gilgamesh handed me this.
addition to the main storyline. The sheer girth of the script was intimidating to say the least, but Exceed had firmly committed themselves. Thus, it became 14-hour workdays for 6 days a week for almost a year.
So basically a normal day in the Western AAA games industry? Well, by modern standards anyway. God, it has gotten bad. When is the bubble gonna burst on the Western AAA gaming industry anyway?
Translating the raw Japanese text, with the majority of it being handled by Xseed's editor, Jessica Chavez. Then, in March of 2011, Trails in the Sky was released exclusively on the PSP in North America, and hardcore fans of JRPGs rejoiced the world over. They would now be able to experience this little wonder of a game, their prayers having finally been answered.
Where's the butt? Oh wait, I heard you just start to I just heard you inhale. What's the butt?
And nobody bought it.
Really? Explain. Explain.
There's a couple of reasons for this. One, while the PSP was quite the beast in Japan, with RPGs coming out for it
Oh right, PSP, so a handheld device. Okay, yep, say no more.
almost daily, the same could not be said for the rest of the world.
Let me put it this way, 100,000 sales for Advance Wars 1 within the first few days was good back in the day.
By 2011, its North American and European game lineup had been steadily shrinking, and Sony themselves stopped supporting the handheld with major first-party games around this time.
Ironic considering, actually yeah, wasn't the PS Vita well liked as well, but just didn't sell all that well either? Man, Sony cannot catch a break on their handhelds, can they?
So, being locked on a declining piece of hardware in the West no doubt hurt its sales. The second factor for the no success had many pointing to the game's main title, The Legend of Heroes, and its shocking, wondrous banality. Both Xseed and Falcom were devastated by this, as the amount of fervor around the series from Western fans seemed to indicate it would be a smash, and
well, the problem that you run into there is that for people to know about it in the Western market, presumably they're the people who would be fan translating anime for piracy sites and whatnot. They're the kind of people who would likely already know Japanese and be very into it. So if you're showing something this dense, even back then there were way too many games for people to play. So if it's that dense, are you necessarily going to buy it a second time when you've already played through it once?
and considering all the work and time that had gone into the localization, it was pretty demoralizing. It made both companies question whether bringing over more games after that was even worth it, and was a very real possibility that Trails could have remained locked in Japan from then on out. The only reason it didn't was the fact that Second Chapter was a sequel in the strictest sense, being a direct continuation after an ending that can only be described as dangling off the edge of some type of mountain.
You could have just said cliffhanger. You don't have to be that fancy, man.
After remaining mum for several months, fans started asking Xseed about plans to localize Second Chapter, which was fair, because in Xseed's initial announcement of their partnership with Falcom, they stated outright that they plan to bring all 3 games to the West.
Oh. Okay, I didn't even need to say it. Your editing beat me to it. Fair enough.
In an interview with Kotaku, Xseed Vice President Ken Barry relayed a situation that is all too common nowadays. Any announcement we made on our Facebook page almost...
Wow, remember when people made announcements on Facebook? I remember when Facebook started, man.
always the first post replied to it is, "Where's Trails SC?"
Where's Silk Song?
No matter what we talk about, the first post is always, "Where's Trails SC?"
Where's Silk Song? Yes, I'm gonna say it twice. It's funny.
While the fan
me.
desire was there, the actual realities of bringing it over were too sobering. Not only was there data backing up the fact that the Trails fanbase was just too small, if Xseed did commit 10 more months to bring out Second Chapter, that wouldn't leave enough staff to localize any other potentially far more profitable games.
Fair enough.
Did I say 10 more months? Yeah, that would be true if it wasn't for the little detail that Second Chapter was twice the length of its predecessor.
Oof. Big oof.
To put it in perspective, the script dwarfed, let's see what I did there, all 3
Really?
Lord of the Rings books combined, and screw it, probably the Silmarillion too.
You might want to double check that before you make claims like that. Those are dense.
It would take far longer to localize this particular game, so it was a massive gamble Exceed wasn't ready to take, and that's when fate smiled, or maybe frowned upon the situation.
Or chuckled, maybe, by how you're describing it.
This was because they were then approached by a smaller studio called Carpe Fulgur, who offered to assist Exceed in any of their upcoming localization projects.
Oh, you got saddled with the big task, huh? Oh boy, oh boy.
And wouldn't you know it, they just so happen to have one.
I can't even snark anymore. The video's doing it for me. And not even be transformative with this.
Thus, they would grab the reins of second chapter's localization, which, just to clarify, would encompass both translating the raw text and then editing it to give it more life and nuance. The translations would be handled by Robin Light Williams, while Andrew Dice would do the editing. These two partners made up Carpe Fulgur. Falcom, however, was hesitant about second chapter, as they were still so distraught over the last game's commercial failure.
Yeah, that's fair.
Exceed still needed them to provide programmers to get the translated text into the game's PSP source code, and even worse, Falcom wasn't interested in any other ports. Exceed was insistent that they absolutely needed a Western PC release, because by the time second chapter would come out, the PSP would be even more dead than the dead that it already was in the West.
I'm surprised that they didn't worry about trying to put it on mainline PlayStation then.
At the end of the day, the two studios compromised with an informal verbal deal, as
Oh, that never ends well.
Falcom were simply too cautious to commit to a written contract.
Yeah, those kind of gentlemen's agreements are fine when it's small fries, but not something this big. Come on, guys.
Carpe Fulgur started work under the assumption that Falcom would officially sign on the dotted line eventually, and things went relatively smoothly for the first few months.
But by the sounds of it, 14-hour work week, 6 days a week. Well, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week for a year. And then the first few months it's going fine. Where's the but?
In that same Kotaku article I mentioned earlier, DICE recalled this fleeting period when things were going okay. At the time, I didn't think it would take very long for Falcom to see the light and to sign off on doing Trails in the Sky for PC. It was the only real way Trails was going to make money. I had faith that we'd get that sorted out maybe within a year.
Is this where the butt comes in?
More than 2 years later, around June of 2013, things weren't any better, and in fact, in many ways, they were even worse. Falcom still hadn't negotiated a contract with Exceed, and Carpe Fulgur still hadn't finished their work. Progress had slowed down dramatically the longer they went without a signed deal, and Andrew Dice explained that everyone was worried that Falcom would just pull out of the project altogether.
And this is why you don't do such gentlemen's agreements, because the problem is that without anything signed, you end up in a catch-22 where you don't want to work on it because you don't know if it's all going to be dust in the wind tomorrow. They don't want to sign off on it because, you're taking forever on what you are working, so why would they? So, how the hell did this even get done?
Sowing the seeds of doubt that all this translation work would ever see the light of day.
Exactly.
The uncertainty had been eating at us and prevented us from getting anything done. It had been in a state of limbo for 2 years, and we legitimately didn't know if it was going to happen. Fortunately, Exceed's unexpected commercial success with Falcom's own Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles on the PC showed the Japanese company that the market was viable. This was then the impetus for them to finally negotiate an official contract for a second chapter.
Gilgamesh did hand me those 2 games. I'll have to check them out at some point. Though, probably handle them offline given the circumstances, but more on that later.
With all the business now out of the way, they made the announcement public. Trails would continue on both the PSP and PC in the summer of 2014, and everything was going to be just fine.
Until it wasn't.
Andrew Dice then started sending over completed files to Exceed, and that's when they realized that thousands upon thousands of lines of translated work was in the wrong file format.
What do you mean? Wait, hang on. What file format are you using? Actually, that is an important question. What file format are you using?
DICE had sent everything in normal text files instead of it being in a spreadsheet, the industry.
That's industry standard is. You know what? I guess spreadsheet does make sense since that you can ported it off, as it were, into, well, so that you have a proper match and can compare and contrast directly. I guess spreadsheet makes sense. Wouldn't have necessarily thought of it for, I guess that does make sense. I mean, my first thought is, why are you using a spreadsheet for something that isn't raw data and calculations? But, fair enough.
Standard, which resulted in Xseed's editor, Jessica Chavez, to have to copy and paste every single line into the proper spreadsheet for about 2 whole months.
You know, at that point, you could probably just program something to do it for you. Even if it's a CSV file, that would probably be fine, but what do I know?
DICE, for his part, made no excuses. He simply didn't double check to make sure it was the right format. But fortunately, they had completed the main storyline. But since this is Trails we're talking about, the main storyline only encompassed 50% of the script.
Well, I mean, it's a JRPG, so that's to be expected. I mean, there's still plenty for Xenoblade still to see to, and we haven't even seen to the DLC. Well, even after we finish that, there'll be plenty to see to, I suspect, so we'll see how it goes, right?
Everything else, the menus, item descriptions, and non-essential NPCs, each with their own side stories, were still not done. The problems kept piling up. Jessica Chavez noticed that Carpe Fulgur had not adhered to the same terminology and naming conventions Xseed had established with the first game, leading to hundreds of inconsistencies. Now in the 90s, stuff like that was fairly common, but Xseed found it completely unacceptable.
Yeah, because it's no longer the 90s at that point.
Especially since second chapter took place within the same world. Thus, every single line needed to be checked and edited again.
Hooray for Control F!
Dyson Williams were, as you can imagine, distraught by all these mistakes. While Falcom had certainly dragged their feet and had delayed things in their own way, second chapter now had an officially announced release date, so the pressure wasn't going to go anywhere but up. These delays put a concrete strain on the relationship between both localization companies, and as the months crept into 2014, DICE started ignoring Xseed's emails demanding progress updates.
Wait, ignoring? How the hell did you get away with that?
Anxiety kept building up over the weight of having to deliver the rest of the work in just a few more months, with his fledgling company's reputation on the line. He was massively behind on his editing, and coupled with the mistakes he had already made, he spiraled into a deep depression. Then,
I'm surprised that's all he spiraled into.
in March of 2014, DICE left Williams a note in his doorframe. They lived in the same complex, and then returned to his apartment with the intent to end his own life.
Okay, I was reading part of that as he was saying it, and then holy crap, jeez.
Fortunately, Robin found the note in time and rushed to save his friend. They spoke at length, and fortunately, Andrew changed his mind that day. However, the enormity of the work left to do was simply too much, and for Andrew's own mental health, he decided to end the deal with Xseed and to step away from the project. They sent over the remainder of what they had done, and by that point, 100% of the script had been translated, but only 50% had been edited. Jessica Chavez then took over, as Xseed simply didn't have the time to farm it out to anyone else. She crunched every day for another 9 months, and by the start of 2015, had finished her final checks. Then, the game needed to be actually tested. While not nearly as detrimental to the experience as crashes or falling out of world, bug testing for text, especially this damn much of it, presents its own unique issues.
Yeah, I could imagine. Note to self, if you ever get into game dev, let fan translations handle it for you for a while. Why did I choose what I chose? More on that later.
Getting cut off, truncated, stretching to enormous size for no reason, and
especially given the differences between Japanese text and English text.
any number of things can affect the words you see on a screen, and vice versa. And to properly test all of it, it took a further 6 months. While Exceed could handle the PC version on their own, Falcom were solely responsible for the PSP, and because of the difference in time zones, it made constant communication and build checks particularly demanding and, shockingly, very slow. There were
Shockingly. That's not the shocking part. I mean, just trying to go back and forth with two developers on the same machine can be painful, especially if you have merge conflicts. Shockingly slow? No, expectingly slow.
already a year behind schedule in the summer of 2015, and inconsistencies were still being found within the text. But eventually, Exceed were forced to put their foot down. We just had to set a firm date. We said, okay, after this date, that's it. No more text changes. No more addressing of any bugs unless it's something that's very major. We need to get this product out. Not just for the fans that are waiting, but for our own sanity.
And for your own pocketbook by the sounds of it.
Thus, on October 29th, 2015, 5 years after Exceed proclaimed they're bringing the games westward, second chapter released on Steam and PSP. In the Kotaku article just before that fateful day, Andrew Dice said, "For everything that happened over the years, I'm still enormously proud of the work I did on Trails in the Sky second chapter. Second chapter has had more twists and turns getting out the door than just about any title I've heard of. But the game is still going to come out, and it's going to be great fun, and it's going to leave a lot of people satisfied." And fortunately, it did. The fan reception to second chapter was overall very positive, and this finally equated to stronger sales. And since then, tons of Trails RPGs have made their way over, complete with English voice acting. And while Exceed stopped publishing them in 2017, NIS America took over, with Trails of Cold Steel 4 a few days away from releasing on the Switch and PC on April 9th. Over in Japan, Falcom released the 10th game in the series, Hajimari no Kiseki, in the summer of 2010, and have since unveiled the newest game in the series running on a fresh engine. So, fortunately, despite all the stress, delays, and heartache the localization process went through, these legends are going to continue to be told all over the world. Alright, that felt like about 1 million words. That
Okay, oh, you're doing a gag right now. Alright, carry on.
did that? No. Oh, that's not even close. Wow. Thanks again to Jason for nominating this unique subject. If you know of any other arduous RPG adventures, let me know in the comments below, or head on over to the Flophouse VIP Patreon and become a big boss to bestow me with a future quest. See you next time, and thanks for watching.
Alright, so we'll leave it there. Since I don't know if I'll get copyright struck for the music, you do not mess with Japanese companies and their music. Just saying that right now. So, that is that. I can see why Gilgamesh has been wanting me to watch that. Okay, fair enough. Not going to be seeing to that game for a long time before you ask. Alrighty, that should be sufficient for that topic. So, let me go ahead and see to what chat's been up to. What's Chad been up to? So, more discussion on Maxor. Wait, he made a Doom Eternal video? I'll have to check that. Let's see. What else has Chat been up to? Alright, Chat being silly with some of the wording used. Let's see, starting to catch up, but I'm going off how I remembered. Doing 3. Well, how long is the stream gonna be? Let's see, where are we right now? Probably another hour with what we have left. The Falcom music is royalty free. Fun fact, all of it is. Just need to credit composer. Huh. That's kind of surprising. Surprisingly generous on that count. Alrighty, so. Next on the docket, as you can probably tell, I've been doing a bit of an experiment over the last few months where I've been trying out some other content. So it started out back in, I think it was December, when I put out the Freerun video. Where was it? Yeah, would have been December looking at that time frame. So, short version, I saw a video enter my feed that annoyed me, and so I decided to try my hand at doing response videos, and honestly, I find myself in both a very unfamiliar and yet very familiar space. I never would have seen myself making that kind of content because, as I said in the free ring video, it's usually a matter of, oh, I see video on feed that I know is going to be bait or something like that, I click away, but I got curious about it because of what the video author was posting on Twitter, and because of that, dug into the rabbit hole, and it got a shocking amount of attention, which I suppose shouldn't be surprising given how popular Freerun is and given the hot take I was looking at, but still. So I experimented with it a couple more times, and I sat there going, I find myself facing the exact same problem that I faced a decade ago, literally, where I want my quote main channel at the time to focus more on reviews, but I also want to do Let's Play content, so let's make a channel that I can call Dr. J Unscripted, where I can put the Let's Plays, and I can have my main channel focused on the reviews. And now this channel, I'm seeing the exact same circumstance where I've got the ongoing Xenoblade 2 stuff, and yet, well, how much longer do I want that to go? And how much do I want it to go beyond that? And honestly, I don't have a good answer for that right now. So we're going to be doing basically small channel update stuff in the meantime. And I'll lead it into the third and final video on the docket accordingly. So I find myself in a curious position with what I want this channel to look like long term. Because on one hand, I've struck on something that people are interested in, and I'd be a fool not to keep going with it, especially since it can be interesting for me to make as well. So definitely an interesting creative exercise, turning what argumentation I've been throwing at the review channel, talking about how good our video game is or not, and seeing, okay, how well does the video hold up to scrutiny? So it has definitely been an interesting challenge for me, and gives me an opportunity to let this be an experimental ground for a lot of stuff. But at the same time, I'm sat here going, Let's Plays haven't really been in vogue in a long time, and I wasn't planning on doing all that much. So if people are subscribing for video responses mainly, how much should I experiment on this? Do I start up another channel for this sort of thing? Do I abandon it entirely? Do I only just finish what I have currently? And what has me conflicted is that before we get to any of the final videos, I'm actually going to dig VLC back up. Because before all this happened, I made a decision that, you know what would be fun? I technically started publishing my Maddening Mode run for Fire Emblem Engage a long time ago, just haven't done anything with it in a while, given the time commitment required for the style of video I'm making for it. But I think it would be fun as a complement to what I'm doing on the review channel with Fire Emblem Engage, to also publish my hard mode run, the first run I had ever done. I've already posted a highlight from at least the release stream of me being dissatisfied, to put it simply, with one of the support conversations. So, but what has me curious is, okay, so I think it would be a good compliment to see my raw reaction to it as well. To see, okay, this is what I thought of it in the moment, this is what I failed to notice in the moment, this is what I did notice in the moment, this is my raw reaction to the gameplay, how much I was stressing out about it, and all that fun stuff. So I think it would be valuable. I just don't have a good place to put it. And so before we get on with the remainder of it, I may as well give myself an excuse to stand up, refill my water bottle and whatnot, by putting on one of my own videos. So the only context that you need to know for what you're about to see is that is that leading up to this, there was a lot told about a very specific character, to where everyone is now on the same page regarding what that character has been up to and what she's been made to do against her will. She now knows when she was in the dark. Pretty much everybody knows now about the specifics. So this is a clip that's about 6 minutes of me reacting to what I'm calling the moment Fire Emblem Engage lost me. Man, that was a lot. Ain't you glad? But yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to do a sizzle reel or a highlight reel of the first attempt. Man, I've spent 3.5 hours with this battle. How's that make you? How's that feel? Good job, devs. You made me work for it. You really made me work for it. Thanks for this. I hate your story, but I like your game.
The ring we gave Hyacinth. They snatched it.
Oh, actually, yeah, it would be within easy snatching distance, wouldn't it? Because Hyacinth would. Oh, right, nice.
We gotta protect the other ones. Let's get them onto the ship.
I will take the ring of the Hero King.
Come, my lady. We must hurry.
What?
Is something the matter?
Zephia, give me your ring.
What are you planning?
Just do it.
Very well.
Wait, that didn't sound like possessed Vale. Hang on. Yep. How did they not notice that?
But why?
I know you can't forgive me for all the things I've done. But still, you must know. I need you to know that even though our friendship was brief, it meant everything.
If he can hear you, the rest can hear you. What are you doing? You just gave away that you're. Oh my. There's no reason why they wouldn't kill you now.
What the hell?
You filthy defect!
Why didn't you just turn tail? Why would you not just run? Why would you not jump overboard? There's about 5 different ways that you could maybe get away with this. You had full power. You could use Sigurd to help you get yourself away. Oh my god. Here I was complimenting you for your gameplay. Then I did say I hate your story, but then you broke. There's about 5 different ways you could have made this work. What the hell are you thinking, Vale?
Vale!
When we return, I'll see that you never wake up again!
Mavir, keep an eye on those other rings.
Understood. The Ring of the Holy Knight. Thank you, Vale.
Why would you not just jump overboard?
Emblem Sigurd. Emblem Leaf. I'm glad you two are back.
As am I. Allow me to apologize for failing to protect you at the cathedral. All this time, within my dimmed consciousness, I feared you and I would never again meet.
Well, technically we did.
Sigurd, that was my fault, not yours.
As you saw, they have been twisting Vale's mind and using her as a pawn. With Sombron's movement limited, it is she who carries out his will.
I see.
Should we try to rescue her?
First, we have to help the people of Flora. We can go to Elusia after we've put out the remaining fires and rescued the survivors. With this fight, we have 8 rings. We're at an advantage to take the other 4.
Yes. Victory is in sight.
Alfred, why don't you go to the castle? Tell Queen Ev what has happened here.
Yeah, leave the village to us.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.
At least this part's still relatively stable. It's not as if it would be hard to mess this part up, let me put it that way.
Be safe, Vale.
Why did she not just jump overboard? Why did she not just run? They were retreating. There's about 5 different ways you could have made this work. You could have at least locked her up somewhere that... Surely there is a way that you could have made this freaking work. No, you could have actually made this work. What the hell, game? You couldn't have gotten the other 4 rings. But you better have a really damn good reason for this. Otherwise, man. Man. I know you need to parcel out the rings. You had a good reason. You could have had Vale retreat. You could have had her locked up while they figured out how to get rid of the mind control bit or whatever nonsense Zephia put on. There's about all the fact that it is brief. There's so much you could have done with. you could have kept her in a secure place. If you can theoretically jail Alear, although we don't know that for certain, what is necessarily to stop you from jailing Vale in order to ensure that while they figure out what's wrong with her, while they figure out a solution, that they can handle everything else? Is there really nothing that could hold them? Surely there's a place in the Somniel that you could lock her away that would be secure enough. Surely there's something magically enchanted that could hold at least, if not hold the Felddragon, at least hold Vale. Surely there's that contingency. If you're able to seal away the Felddragon, what's stopping you from temporarily sealing Vale in something? Alear may not have that knowledge, but surely there is that knowledge somewhere within the Somniel. There is just... You know, I used to be able to say that there was nothing objectively wrong with the story. Now I can say there is something objectively wrong. If they don't come up with a really damn good reason for why Vale didn't just jump into the sea, I'm gonna be pissed. Spoiler alert, they did not come up with a damn good reason. So, yeah, I have motivation to put out this Let's Play for Fire Emblem Engage, but I don't know what would necessarily be the correct time or place for it. So, all that to say, and for the record, I remember there being a comment when I was going through Metal Gear Rising and riffing on the game, saying, hey, lean back and have fun with it. Metal Gear Rising is Exhibit A of when I'm riffing on a game but having fun with it. This is what it looks like when I'm actually pissed at a game. This is what it looks like when, okay, no, we're not having fun anymore, you just suck. Major difference. Major freaking difference. So, at some point, I do want to put out the rest of this. I don't think there's any clip in here that's as spicy, well, in the Let's Play that's as spicy as this. I think it's actually kind of funny because this entire circumstance wouldn't have even happened if Zephyr hadn't blabbed about the whole thing, but... oh, man. The writing in this game is so bad. And then there's a couple things that I realize in hindsight that, oh, nothing objectively wrong? Okay, you missed a couple things, but either way. Definitely worth discussing, but that'll be saved for the review channel and when I inevitably figure out where to put the Let's Play. So, for now, I guess then, next thing on the docket before we get to the final game, well, before we get to the final video, can you compare Xenoblade 2's Blade quests? I'd say Engage is worse from a story standpoint. Well, actually, what would I? Problem is, it's hard to make a direct comparison because you get characterization from very different points to where the characterization is technically stronger for Engage by virtue of the fact that you just have more time with them, but it is still fairly weak. What if the next Fire Emblem does what Engage does, but a bit more worse? Well, good thing I'm not pre-ordering that one because whatever new Fire Emblem is out there, unless it's a remake, I ain't touching it until I hear back that it's not another Engage. I don't intend to get burned a second time, let's put it that way. I was willing to give it a shot after 3 Houses blew me away, but nope. Still, before I get too distracted from everything else that's going on, let's see. So, next thing on the docket, since we're pseudo in channel update mode, I figured I would talk through some of the feedback I got on the response videos. So, first up is the one I made more recently, just a week ago. Published it a little before the prior Xenoblade stream. And honestly, it got a lot more attention than I expected. Although, to be fair, the Freerun video got a lot more than I expected. But I suppose it makes sense in hindsight because there are a lot of people who have, even if they don't watch Jim Sterling anymore, they have at least heard the name and maybe watched at some point. And because of that, there's invariably going to be a decent amount of attention of, oh, wait, what's he up to then? What's going on there? Why are you putting out this video? What's up? So, in that sense, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. Though, and as far as the feedback is concerned, there were 2 major points of feedback that were certainly useful to me. So, in one case, there was a matter of how I was addressing Jim Sterling. There was a section earlier, well, in the script at one point for this response video where I thought, okay, So I know that Jim Sterling prefers to be addressed as such, but here's my reasoning for why I'm going to be addressing him a particular way. But I had removed that because I felt that my introduction was already getting long in the tooth, and even now I still feel it's a bit much. Probably should have condensed it down even further if I could have. So I decided to remove it. It didn't come up in conversation at all with respect to the video topic I had chosen, so I figured, okay, don't bring it up. And then, literally the second comment asks about it. So, I decided to just pin that comment, gave it a brief reply. If you care about that topic, it does get into culture war stuff, which means that there's a limit to how much that I can realistically engage with it without breaking my self-imposed neutrality. So, by virtue of that, if you care about the subject, there's a response and a ton of discussion underneath that. The only other major bit of feedback worth addressing there is that the point about me going after Jim Sterling for going on too many tangents would land a lot better if I wasn't also going on tangents as well. And I think one comment basically asked, wait, who died and made you Mutahar? Which, you know what, fair enough. I shouldn't just talk about the Linux video, I should just get to work on the Linux video. That's fair enough. And when you're dealing with a response video, given that the original video was, 24 minutes, and then this ends up being an hour, by virtue of the fact that, hey, you gotta play his entire video, then you gotta give arguments, and you still have to give your own introduction and conclusion. You can't, this isn't like the review channel or one of your reviews where you're sat there going, alright, I can spend as much time on this particular topic as I want, I can go off on whatever tangent I need to in order to demonstrate the point and adequately explain myself. And by virtue of that, it's okay for me to go off on tangents on the review channel. For a response video, not so much. You need to trim the fat wherever possible. You need to embody the brevity as the soul of wit that you threw in his face. So, in that respect, fair enough. I will keep that in mind as I work towards the next one. Apart from that, there was also a video I did addressing Synthetic Man's Tears of the Kingdom video. And let me pull up the main thing on here was just, there wasn't that much feedback on it because it just didn't get as much attention. It was a staler topic on someone who's less well known, which, unsurprising, there were a ton of videos that came out around the time that his take ended up being shotgunned out there. So I suppose it makes sense that mine wouldn't get as much attention because it is very much late to the party on that count. So yeah, fair enough. But the main thing that I got back as a point of feedback is our accusations of bad faith. Now, admittedly, you hear the term bad faith, and with how much it gets shotgunned around over the internet, your first thought when you hear it is, okay, are you just mad that I disagree with you, or are you earnestly saying that I'm not honestly engaging with the arguments? So, digging back through the video, and there were a couple of points where you could argue, yeah, okay, this is bad faith. In one of them, it was mentioned explicitly by one of the comments, where I basically said, okay, so you have this issue where you don't like the fact that you could accidentally have material for an arrow, just fuse it to an arrow to make it more powerful, when you would have preferred to keep that around for an armor upgrade later. And so I agreed with that point, saying, yeah, it would be nice to have a UI improvement, a quality of life improvement to address that, but since I never ran into it, I'm just going to say skill issue. Which, at the time that I wrote that and recorded that, the prior point had also been a little snarkier, but I needed to revise that after realizing I had made a mistake in my understanding of the game. So, at the time I revised that, I should have revised that as well. And honestly, I probably shouldn't have even had that as a thing anyway. I should have just said, okay, yeah, it would be nice if it was possible to filter out specific options on the material fusion menu so that we don't have to scroll as far. If only to preserve stuff for either to preserve stuff for armor upgrades or a specific quest we're working on. You know what, fair enough. The shots that I take are only going to work insofar as they actually have meaning. Insofar as I am judicious enough to where when I take the shot, it will land. Otherwise, it brings into question every other shot I take. Is it actually legitimate? So I need to have better trigger discipline when it comes to any shot I take at someone. So in that case, fair enough. You got me there. The other point that I thought of wasn't brought up explicitly by a comment, but was something I should work on as well. because there was a point where he was discussing the interactions between Link and Sidon, and he was taking the stance that there is something romantic involved in there, where my first instinct is to say, no, you're full of shit, stop it. And so before he even talks about his reasoning or anything regarding that, my first thought is, okay, let's head this argument off at the pass. It is brotherly camaraderie. Sidon's fiance is right there. It's heavily implied that Link and Zelda may be together right now, though it's not explicitly stated. You're reading too much into this. And so when he then makes an argument following that, he then doesn't actually prove or disprove anything by how he shows it. He just shows what's going on for one image, and before saying something along the lines of, oh, but yeah, I know there's the subtle relationship between these two, and I know I'm reading too much into it, but this is how you groom people, you desensitize them to it. And my first thought was, oh, you talking about grooming after what you've said about certain characters? Yeah, no, I don't buy that. No, shut up. So, not necessarily an invalid tactic to then say, okay, you are the last person to be making this argument. It's, in some case, skewering him for hypocrisy isn't necessarily a bad thing, but after I had done that, I should have then said, even if I completely take you seriously, what exactly are you implying here? I mean, what exactly are they showing us? A gay relationship? Well, assuming you're correct anyway. What are they showing us? A gay relationship where nobody treats it as a big deal? Isn't this what you want from them? What, would you prefer that they start every interaction by saying their name and pronouns? You'd just complain about that and call it woke if that were the case, so what's the deal here? So, and what, unless you want to take the stance that we can pray the gay away, in which case you think that just showing it'll convert people, but either way, that's getting into the weeds, and I think you get the point. So, even if I agree on the BS point, I should have still had a point where I say, alright, even if we agree on this BS point, your argument is still terrible. I should have still had that moment, regardless of the circumstances. So, either way, lesson learned. I will do my best to carry all that into whatever I do next, though I don't have a clear idea for what to do a video response on next. My focus as of right now, at least for the Unscripted channel, outside of the Xenoblade stuff, is going to be on a video essay, because I mentioned at the end of the free and response video that there's a script on my computer entitled Keep Your Politics to Yourself. I have recorded most of the audio I need for same, and am currently editing it. I'm treating it the audio the same way as I would treat anything on the review channel, and I'll probably need to rebrand the Unscripted channel to something like Media Lab, but still, whatever the case may be, there we are. Zelda games peaked with Adventure of Link. I need to play that one at some point, although I've heard mixed things about it. Regardless, that's all that really needs to be said about that as far as overarching plans, but corollary to that, when I put up the Tears of the Kingdom response video, it's actually kind of funny because I knew it was my reminder to post on Discord, ironically, that hey, announcing the video response that, oh, and I forgot to do that for the Jim Sterling one now that I think of it, but either way. So, I was reminded to do it because a friend texted me within a few minutes of the video going live, basically saying, what the hell did you just unearth? And so I talked with him about it for a bit. We go on a bit of a back and forth. And then chat's being silly with that comment. Peaked with CDI, huh? Clearly. So my friend and I go back and forth about it, and over the course of the discussion, he then says, hey, here's a palate cleanser. And if he's offering it as a palate cleanser for me, I may as well offer it as a palate cleanser for you. Originally, I had planned on looking at a different video. One of the recommended thrown into Discord was, I believe, Some Call Me Johnny's review of DK64, though it's unlikely and I had agreed to it at the time, because despite being a 45-minute video, which would be a lot to tackle as part of a live environment, might be better to record offline and to see if it is actually worth recording a video reaction or publishing it at all. At that point, just use it as something when I can't make it nights, but either way. Putting that aside, my thought was, when I agreed to it at first, my thought was, okay, this channel was lifted up as an example when you all were roasting me over my line delivery on the review channel. And it might be good, since that I am trying to still build up the review channel, to see, okay, what's the competition doing? What are other people doing that people seem to be latching onto? That's why I agreed with it then. Though I swapped this in for that because of it being more topical, for lack of a better word, with what I had recently discussed, especially given my unusual take on Tears of the Kingdom to begin with, given that I didn't like Breath of the Wild, but like Tears of the Kingdom a lot more. So, in that sense, I think this will be a lot more interesting for us to talk about, and a more interesting subject matter for me, because in theory, this should be easier to defend than the video I responded to a while back in my How Not to Review Tears of the Kingdom video. Because that one just said Tears of the Kingdom is not a masterpiece. You just have to prove a substantial flaw in order to demonstrate that. Tears of the Kingdom is not perfect. That could mean anywhere from it has this one minor nitpick here, or it has all of these serious problems, and you've still technically said Tears of the Kingdom is not perfect. So, I honestly have no idea what to expect from this, and I'm very curious to see what it has to say for itself by virtue of that. So, is there anything I need to worry about in chat first? What are your thoughts on the Switch 2? I'm hopeful that it's good. So, we'll see how it ends up being. I'm enthusiastic to see what they do with the tech. I am saving up a bit of my disposable income for it. I intend to be on the ground floor for this one, trying to get into one of the showcases that are happening in I think it's Los Angeles, Dallas, or New York, I think, are the 3 locations, somewhere in California anyway. But I wasn't able to get into the one closest to family, so c'est la vie. C'est la vie. I will be very curious to see what they have to say on the Switch 2 on April 2nd, once that we see the direct for that. Good thing I'm working from home that day, though before you ask, I'm not streaming my reaction to it because I am technically on the clock at that point. So, either way, that'll be all for that topic. Anything else I need to address? I think that covers everything of note, apart from chat being silly about a couple things. So, let's take a look and see what this guy has to say about Tears of the Kingdom. Scott doesn't need credibility, he needs to complain about a Zelda game? Oh, this is gonna be fascinating, isn't it? I wish I wasn't in... Actually, hang on. I have the Restore YouTube Dislikes plugin on my main browser, actually. Hang on. Let me open a main window. Alright, not gonna show this, though, since that you don't need to see my recommended. Alright.
Hey, y'all!
Shut up. I'll hear from you in a moment. Okay, actually, to be fair, the YouTube Dislikes plugin isn't necessarily the most accurate because it's very much trying to extrapolate data. I'll be curious. Actually, that might be fascinating. I'd be curious to know what would happen if I threw one of my response videos into here relative to what my actual like to dislike ratio is. That might be a good experiment next time next time I think about that. But either way, all that to say, it seems to have been well received based on that, so, and based on the view count, yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, it looks well received, so, yeah, alrighty. No sense beating around the bush then. Doesn't the plugin just estimate the dislikes via views and likes? It does, and based on the people who hit dislike while you have the plugin. So in theory, my dislike on this video would matter more if I were using the plugin. So I wish the dislike button was not lost. I do too. Honestly, the dislike button has been incredibly useful to me. I mean, you saw in the free and response video, it proves very valuable to gauge, okay, so what exactly was liked, and I appreciate it on the back end, and honestly, I don't mind people seeing it. Yeah, go ahead. Tell me if I'm shit. Tell me where I'm going wrong, please. That way I can be better. That way I can make better stuff. Hone my craft and all that fun stuff. Still, whatever the case may be, what the hell? 3.5? Oh, okay, you know what? I can't say anything with what I'm about to do to engage. Or, well, about to, over the course of 3 years at the rate I'm going, but still. I'm gonna have to single that one out, aren't I? How would I even do that? Would I have to? Okay. I am getting a link for this real quick. Copy link address. I am throwing this into... I had an idea for meta reviews where I talk more explicitly about... where I talk more explicitly about where I treat long-winded video reviews on YouTube, the 2+ hour ones, and try and approach them the same way that I would approach a film review. 3 years is too generous? With what I have planned, not necessarily. I actually have a timetable for Engage and actually have more concrete stuff to work with. But either way, getting back on topic, one of my ideas for this channel, since I'm experimenting right now, is to look at longer videos and see if they can be critiqued in a similar vein to an actual film review. So, let's see how it goes. That might be a suitable target then, or a suitable experiment on this, because it clearly got a lot of attention. So, I hate Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, I dislike Breath of the Wild, but I wouldn't say I hate it, huh? Oh well, whatever the case may be. Thoughts on Got the Waz as a channel? I don't watch a whole lot of his stuff. I'll see it occasionally being discussed, but I really don't know too much about him. So I'm going in basically as blind as possible. So speaking of which, so I have a react request. Throw it in the Discord. I'll signal one way or the other whether it makes sense to do. So, and honestly, if you have anything you wish for me to react to or respond to, feel free to throw it in the Discord, link in the description. So, either way, enough beating around the bush. It's probably going to take us an hour to get through this. So, let's take this stream to 3 hours and get on with this.
Hey y'all, Scott here. I got my Halloween costume in early this year.
Okay. That's a bit overdone, but okay.
Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild released to critical acclaim in March of 2017. This was immediately recognizable as one of the most impactful gaming moments in recent memory. Hell,
I wouldn't go that far. Well, I guess one of the most gives you a lot of wiggle room on that count. The voice is bugging me for some reason and I can't describe why.
of all time even, which makes it that much more impactful as I throw it off this bridge. At the launch
Wait, you're like me? Huh? Hang on, what?
of Nintendo Switch, this was right alongside it, and was the only thing I cared about on that system for the next month and a half.
Okay, we have different reasons for throwing it off the bridge, huh?
How impressive. I'd say it was the only thing I cared about in general for a bit there. This ended up being the first Zelda game I officially beat. Even though I dabbled in most of the other games throughout the years and really liked what I played, I never saw them through to the end. But it was
Any particular reason why?
Breath of the Wild that truly hooked me and made it so much easier to appreciate and understand what makes Zelda special. And
Mostly because a lot of what made Zelda special wasn't present in it.
judging by how much this game sold, outselling Super Mario Odyssey, pushing the series to more widespread popularity than ever before, even seeing more traditional titles like Link's Awakening and Skyward Sword HD doing better than most comparable games ever did, it's obvious many people had a similar experience to me.
Okay, the editing's a bit weird. Is there a point to this interlude?
Yes, also back in 2017, I decided to ruin my reputation in more ways than one.
Okay, so that was the reason for it? I feel like you could have just... I don't know if you necessarily needed the interlude. Okay, now I'm having a bit of a problem with the editing, but you know what? We'll be here all day if I nitpick that right now. Save it for the video responses.
And talk about a few problems I had with the game.
Well, I've got a few as well. Which problems?
Hey, when you love somebody, you gotta tell them how it is sometimes.
Yep, that's entirely fair. I like Fire Emblem Three Houses. I will say that the monastery sections can drag on for a bit.
Dad, I hate you. I worded this by saying
Dude.
Breath of the Wild isn't perfect. Nothing is. Damn it. Well, I know nobody who gave this game
Really?
a 10 out of 10 was actually saying it was perfect. It was the easiest way to get my point across. To talk about all the annoyances I had with the game that I felt could be improved upon in a potential sequel. And, wouldn't you know? Tears of the Kingdom isn't perfect. Well, after...
Well, I mean, you can bring up literally just a minor nitpick and it's not perfect, so you might need to give more substance than that, but it looks like we're almost done with your intro, at least.
6 years of waiting for a follow-up, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom released on May 12th, 2023, and much like Breath of the Wild, it received 10 out of 10s across the board. This
Mostly on the back of the building mechanics, but let's see what you have to say about that.
Was considered a landmark sequel to a landmark title, something that outdid something undoable. Now, in my opinion, Jesus Christ! Oh my god, I can go underground, I can go up so high and then fall all the way down below, make my own contraptions? How is this running on a broken...
But the prior one ran on the 1.2. It's not that different from a graphical standpoint, but I see what you're doing here. You're setting the tone. But I'm the kind of guy who just wants you to get to the point, so we get to the point.
Nintendo Switch! The new abilities are insane! I can fuse weapons with anything, rewind objects in time, ascend through ceilings. The puzzles are so creative.
I kept forgetting that the phase through ceiling power existed, if I'm honest.
The world is never...
At least for the first few hours, but still. I kept forgetting, okay, how do I get out of this well? Oh, I guess I could just pour it, and then only later I'm kicking myself for forgetting the phase through ceiling, but that's just me being a game journalist.
Ending with so many finely crafted things to do. Yeah! With that
risky to throw water at yourself when you've got all that stuff behind you. I respect the hustle.
Being said, I have a few complaints. Now, you
that's
may
fair.
be saying, Scott, why bother with the pointless negativity? You love this game. Just embrace it.
No, but you want it to be better, so you criticize it in the hopes that it becomes better.
I did. And hey, being negative is...
Did? I still like it. I mean, I've got problems with it, but come on.
It's healthy. The world could use more negativity. Like, haven't you heard?
Okay.
Things have been too...
Alright, you know what? I'll give you that one. That was a good gag.
Positive lately.
Pause that framed. Oh, okay, you know what? Okay, good edit, subtle edit. I appreciate that. Very good.
Son of a bitch.
Alright, you got me back.
In my opinion, Breath of the Wild has one of the greatest openings in all of gaming.
For how long? Are we talking the whole Great Plateau or just up to the title crawl?
Not only for what it is, but what it represented at the time. After the release of Skyward Sword, many lamented the slow opening Zelda titles were notorious for having. Being over-tutorialized, so much dialogue and exposition, and it takes like 2 hours to actually get going. But with
I play CRPGs. That's amateur hour.
this game, you're getting your bearings in the Shrine of Resurrection for 5 minutes. Once you enter the open world, one quick title sequence, pan over to the old man who you can go up to for advice on what to do next. But at this point, it's all up to you. Sure, to get your paraglider to advance past this area, you have to visit the 4 shrines and tower. But there aren't excessive cutscenes and dialogue telling you to do this. Hell, talking to the old man is how you're directly told what to do. And while that's all really quick and painless, you can just flat out ignore them and go to these things yourself if you want. And because of that, I always felt free in this game to do anything I pleased.
I did not have that experience because it felt like I was constantly concerned as to whether I had the correct gear in order to go to a particular spot, or if I used the good weapon now, would I find myself missing it later on, but that's just my experience.
Even in the opening hour where you're at your most limited, what I saw was an immediate world of endless possibilities. Tears of the Kingdom, on the other hand, this opening isn't bad. It does the job and has some incredibly memorable moments. Though throughout the whole thing, I was constantly thinking to myself, I think I preferred Breath of the Wild's intro. The first bit of gameplay features Link and Zelda exploring the depths of Hyrule Castle, and you walk forward, cutscene, walk forward, cutscene, walk forward, cutscene, then...
Well, that's more a fact of the... Well, that's more... I don't know how you would have gotten around that, let me put it that way, because it's a direct continuation, so you need to catch us up on why exactly Link and Zelda are down here in the first place, and presumably... So, I feel that as annoying as that might be for you, I don't think they could have avoided it.
10 more minutes of cutscenes, and then the tutorial actually begins, which, this is a perfectly fine intro. Feels like many other AAA games. But that's...
It's also well, I also think it's completely unavoidable, but let's see what you... Although, to be fair, just because it is completely unavoidable, you arguably could have condensed it a little bit. Maybe cut down a little bit on Zelda geeking out over the discovery, perhaps a little bit, or perhaps reduced Ganondorf's monologuing a bit, or gotten to the point of the depower Link bit a little faster, but even if you had condensed it down a little bit, And even if we do take it as gospel that, hey, this is unavoidable, okay, if you just don't prefer it, fair enough.
That's just the thing here. It feels like it's doing the exact thing Breath of the Wild set out not to do.
Well, I don't necessarily care because I wasn't a big fan of Breath of the Wild, so there we go.
Because what follows is nearly 3 hours of the Great Sky Island, the first major area in the game, here to give and teach you the major new abilities and reveal more of the plot. And my god, there's so much dialogue, so much stopping to tell you something you already know, and everything is so...
Is there, though? I feel like I just went through this with Synthetic Man. Yeah, you do spend a lot of time up here, but the actual dialogue isn't all that extensive. I literally just went through this with Synthetic Man. Good lord. Do I need to... Actually, you know what? Let me see. Where in the video would it have... Actually, hang on. I can just go over... Actually, I've got the... Okay, I'm gonna go digging for this. Excuse me for a moment. Let's see. Move this out of the way. I don't need to see that right now. Okay. Where's the video itself? I'm gonna go digging into my video response and dig up just the specific numbers. Actually, wait. Hang on. Why am I looking at the videos? I still have the script. Come on. Think, Jay. Why did you make me do this? Anyway. Alright. Right conclusion, but wrong reasons. Where is it? Alright, I think this is the correct file. Okay. Exploration. I know it's in here. Okay, so this was what I wrote down specifically pertaining to... What's it? This is what I wrote down specifically pertaining to the Great Sky Island. Well, to the Great Sky Island. So, the time I spent in combat was about 15 minutes total. Shrine-specific stuff, including transitions and associated cutscenes, was a little under half an hour. So, if we're being generous, we can treat cutscenes and dialogue associated with that as maybe 5, let's say 10 minutes. So, time spent in cutscenes, dialogue, or shops outside of that was a little over half an hour, so it is a substantial amount. That's what? 40 minutes of 3 hours, so that's what? A little under 30%, maybe about 20%. That is, to be fair, substantial. Okay, so he's got a point on that count. Good thing we checked. He does have a point there as far as the amount of dialogue. Okay, so it's not quite the same circumstance as when I was refuting Synthetic Man's argument, as he gave us something more concrete to point out and say, hey, there's probably a bit too much dialogue here. Okay, so he's got me there. And then outside that, what else did I have here? Outside of shrines, the time spent with the Ultra Hand. Okay, that was because of what Synthetic Man called out. Was a little, so Ultra Hand or stuff tangential to it was a little more than 25 minutes, and the remaining 83 was the usual open world stuff. Okay, so he has a point on the dialogue then. I will concede that point.
So damn slow! This island is designed in a way where you don't explore it like the Great Plateau, the first area in Breath of the Wild. It's far more linear. It doesn't look like it, but once you start playing, you realize how there's really not as much to do here other than exactly what the game wants you to do.
Yes and no. It is much more linear, I will grant you that. That's another concrete point that Synthetic Man didn't bring up. Yes, I am going to keep bashing you. You deserve it. But that is another good point to bring up, in that it is more linear. You do have the track you follow. That I will grant you. You are correct on that count. As opposed to the Great Plateau, where you have much more, well, latitude to explore. And longitude, depending on how you look at it. Yes. That is a joke. I'm terrible at jokes, by the way. But, putting that aside, so it is definitely more linear. There is a little bit of variation that you can do with respect to that, as I noticed that Synthetic Man, when I was looking at that video, encountered something that I didn't, because I think after the final shrine, before you head over to open the way and really experience the open world, before that point, there's a point where you have another gliding section, where you can go down and then eventually jump down into everywhere else. But I skipped that entirely in favor of porting over to the nearest shrine, or fast traveling to it, and then using the phase through the ceiling power to get up to where I needed to be. So that whole section I ended up skipping. So it's not entirely linear, but I will grant you that it is very linear. And if what you like about the Great Sky Island is that if you want to tackle the colder section first, you can do it. If you want to tackle the section near the the immobile guardian first, you can do that. You know what? Fair enough. That's a good point.
You just have to keep moving forward to the next story-beating cutscene, which just felt strange from the sequel to the game that defied this. But to be fair, the abilities you get kinda require more tinkering to fully understand, so...
Oh, hey, you're even giving a refutation for your own points. Okay, nice. Respectable.
Obviously, this opening is more guided for a reason. I just think it could have been refined to be quicker, more impactful, more fun, because the Great Plateau could have been home to an entire game, honestly. When I was able to leave, I wasn't going, thank Christ. My eyes widened, thinking, oh, things just expanded so much.
I wasn't thinking that because of the trouble I ran into on the Great Plateau, but that's because I've made my opinions on open world games very felt over the last few months, so I'll leave that be.
I couldn't wait to get off of this goddamn thing.
I wasn't the same way, but to be fair, my focus, since it had been a while since I had played Breath of the Wild, and I had done bare minimum because I wasn't having fun with it. So I'm looking to Tears of the Kingdom and I'm thinking from a designer standpoint of, okay, I see why you did that, okay. Showing how versatile this is by creating scenarios where I'm forced to use it a specific way. Alright, I get this, cool. And then once you get to the open world, okay, now it's on me to figure out how to properly use this, cool. So, in that sense, because of the Ultra Hand especially, you do arguably need something more guided in Tears of the Kingdom, but again, since that it's not necessarily what you'd prefer, well, what we prefer and what is necessary for the game they want to make, not always the same thing, so fair enough.
Geez, Scott, with opinions like those, you should monetize them. Have people call in to tell you off. And as somebody with dog shit opinions would say, that's a horrible idea. Hi, my name is YouTube user Scott Hates Breath of the Wild. I make hourly content on hating Breath of the Wild and failing to make hourly content on hating Breath of the Wild for the past 6 years.
Where are you going with this?
And with Breath of the Wild's sequel releasing, I found this to be the perfect opportunity to take our first caller. Scott, I'm going to find you and skin you alive! This is Hate Scott, why not? Well, let's see what everybody has to say.
Hey there, Scott. Heard you weren't the biggest fan of Tears of the Kingdom. I'm gonna do some cartoonishly evil shit to you. Your house is gonna look like a 30-car pileup. Roman gladiator levels of bullshit.
Okay, I get that you are making an unpopular take, but honestly, I understand the hesitation on that, and you probably get it a hell of a lot more than I would, since that your video got a hell of a lot more attention than mine did, especially since I put mine out a year later, intentionally, because I knew I would never be able to get on the ground floor or anywhere close. So, I understand the inclination to say, alright, I know I'm gonna get hate for this, but honestly, it just makes you look, well, how do I describe it? I think the best way that I can describe it is, it makes you look overly concerned about other people's opinions. If you are certain that you have a valuable take on this, there should be no need for this qualification. The fact that you're making this qualification, I guess it can, to some extent, give you a degree, well, demonstrate a degree of self-awareness. But at the same time, that self-awareness can be delivered with an offhand comment or a refutation of your own arguments or counter-arguments being brought up as you were naturally describing it. Especially since in order for you to have these takes, you would have had to have heard and to know that they are different from the usual. You would have had to see a lot of the discussion around this game. So you would know the counter-arguments to give, and that is how you would address, okay, I know this is an unpopular take, here's what people generally say, here's my refutation. If you're much more straightforward about that, it comes across better, because then you're not having to go on these tangents of, oh, am I gonna be thrown to the wolves? Am I gonna be utterly roasted by this? I mean, I know I will, but I'm having trouble putting it into words, but oh, my point's coming across. It feels like I'm missing it somehow. Apologies, chat. So, all that to say, it looks, well, you know what, I'll just say it. It can appear cowardly to just say, okay, I know this is unpopular, please don't roast me that much. No, stand by your argument, sucker.
When they do your fucking autopsy, you're gonna have a different set of teeth.
Constructive criticism. Yum yum yum.
Focus on the actual constructive criticism then, damn it.
You're a jackass! If you think Tears of the Kingdom isn't the f***ing best game ever made, I will come to Ohio and beat your ass!
Okay, I'll give you that bit. That was a
Like I
good
said,
one.
the abilities you
Well,
have
the Ohio bit, not the rest.
in this game take some getting used to, and justifiably so. I mean, these things are incredible feats of game design and engineering, and that all comes at a price.
Yeah, I still messed up the Ultra Hand sections considerably. I will grant you that. And honestly, I'm not sure how you would improve this is the issue. Short of... How would you improve this? I mean, I think I would intuitively had this down if I had a mouse. But at the same... Or if they had, dare I say, altered the gyro to focus on rotation rather than movement. Because if you're going to abuse the gyro for Breath of the Wild and then all but abandon it for Tears of the Kingdom, surely this would be a good point where you could experiment with that, but what do I know?
Strange product to offer, but to each their own. The Ultra Hand ability is ingenious, and a miracle it works as well as it does. Being able to grab and manipulate objects, sticking them together to other things to create whatever you can imagine, all without the game.
Wait, you don't extinguish the candle by doing that? I am learning things. I should not be having to learn that. Well, I guess that makes sense. It doesn't extinguish the flame? I would have thought it would extinguish the flame if I did that. Huh? Okay.
Exploding. That's a miracle, but it makes sense, because instead, it is I who explodes. Ultra Hand is so damn funky, man.
And of course, you're playing the cruise theme. Okay, come on. Get it out of your system. And though, to be fair, yes. It is the clunky part of it, because I kept mixing up the vertical and horizontal rotation, which aren't what I mean. I guess it makes sense logically speaking. You just use the D-pad on each, but part of me wonders if it would have made sense given that you already have to, I believe, toggle whether you're in rotate or move mode. Would it have made sense to try and bind it to an analog, or perhaps have it? How would you have bound it to the analog, though? I wonder. Huh? Good question, actually. Well. Then again, they had 6 years to try and figure this out, and this was the best they came up with, so take that as you will.
Just trying to rotate an object exactly how you want is so hard to get used to, and
yeah, get used to, I think, is the key part there. You eventually do get used to it, but it does take a while.
You stick an item together and want to unstick them, you have to wiggle the right stick. Why?
Because how else are you gonna do it? I mean, the only other way I could think of is maybe to hit a button, but I mean, you've seen how many buttons they're using to the Ultra Hand at any one time. I feel like that would get confusing after a while, especially since you need something like the... Well, actually, how many are they using for Ultra Hand? I don't want to get my Tears of the Kingdom cartridge out just to find out, yet I'm pretty sure they're using most of the buttons. Maybe if you had a trigger that maybe if you use one of the bumpers, or... I think the triggers are in use. The X and Y aren't in use, I don't think. I know one of the buttons are used to cycle between either move up, down, left, right, and then another to toggle rotation. Well, a button to toggle between those two modes anyway, but... Is it? Does it? Sorry, it's been too long since I've played, apparently. Either way, all that to say, the only other option would have been to just push a button, which probably would have made more sense, but the problem is that if you spend a lot of time and get rid of an important piece and you can accidentally get rid of it by hitting the X instead of the B button, well, I guess the Y button instead of the B button, those two are closer on my controller, I could see that being just as much of a pain. So I think having it be a deliberate action where, no, I'm going to be using the right analog a bunch to where it must be gotten rid of. I think that actually does have a purpose to ensure that, yes, I am serious about getting rid of this.
I get you're trying to convey the feeling of actually unsticking something in real life, but there are a fair amount of buttons not being used when you have Ultra Hand enabled.
Okay, you know what? You would have played it more recently than I have, given when this video is coming out. I will grant you that one.
Why can't I just hit one of those instead? And the
It would probably be easier, although the problem is that, again, you arguably want it to be something that you'd want to commit to. Effectively, using the right analog and wiggling it a bunch is the "are you sure" that the Dungeon Master gives you when you're about to do something stupid.
act of sticking things together can be kind of finicky. Man, either
Yeah,
I'm
that I'll
bad at
grant
this
you
game,
too.
or this ability can be pretty clunky sometimes, and I'm bad at this game. But let's talk one of our other new abilities. Fuse. Much like how
that's
you
great.
can attach objects together with Ultra Hand, you can attach pretty much anything in your inventory together to create stronger items or give them different properties, which opens up so many doors. Let's
How did I never think to do that? I am a dumbass.
attach something to an arrow. Why is this more cumbersome than my taxes?
First of all, no it's not. But second, well, especially since you're a YouTuber, they are absolutely not more cumbersome than your taxes. Although, to be fair, when you're as big as a million subs YouTube channel and getting a decent amount of viewership, your taxes aren't cumbersome because you hand them off to somebody else. But that's beside the point.
Which isn't saying much, but still. Fusing a material...
Dude. I'm not allowed any snark of my own. Everybody always beats me to the punch.
to an arrow you've drawn is done via this menu, which is just every single material you have in a single file line.
Yep. It is the most cumbersome aspect, and I'm annoyed that it showed up in Echoes of Wisdom as well.
It works, it's easy enough, but you collect hundreds of materials in this game, and there's so much empty space on the screen, you cannot tell me this was the best solution here.
Yep, they should have either had a filter option to where you say, hey, don't bring this up for specifically, or they should have allowed you to go into the bigger menu in order to properly grab the specific thing you're looking for. They could have done a lot more than this.
And you know what's crazy? This is one of the best ways Fuse is implemented. Because
Yep.
if we want to fuse our sword or shield with anything in our inventory, you can't do it like with arrows. No. You have to select the item in the pause menu, hold it, drop it in game, select
That is an annoying aspect. Yep.
Fuse on your ability wheel, and then combine it with what you're currently holding. Well, son of a bitch. I had an open 15 seconds in my schedule to fill in there. Thank you, Tears of the Kingdom.
Yep, an entirely fair complaint. You have officially proven that Tears of the Kingdom is not perfect. How far are you gonna go then?
Why do I have to do all this? It should be as simple as selecting the item in your menu and hitting a fuse button. That's basically how it works for arrows. I get they want you to fuse with items on the fly when you find them in the world, and the ability works well in that scenario. But using it in menus with arrows without having to select the ability while not being able to use it in menus with everything else and needing to have fuse selected while doing it is inconsistent. It's clunky. I've lost many a material dropping it in the world to fuse with, and oh, it probably fell off this cliff.
To be fair, should you really be dropping stuff on a cliff like that?
What else are cliffs for, right? Let's try this again. I want to fuse a rocket to my shield. There's an enemy nearby. Let me take care of that. Son of a bitch. Now these abilities are selected by...
Well, why are you trying to fuse materials right next to an enemy? Though, to be fair, in some of the footage I showed on the response video I made, I explicitly showed, oh, I'm fighting a big giant monster right now? Okay. My best weapon broke? Okay. Drop a material on the ground, fuse to it. Alright, keep whacking them. So, I guess I can't say anything, but I wasn't doing it right next to a cliff.
By holding down L to access this wheel containing all of these special little things we can do, like map. Damn, this game has abilities through the fucking roof!
Why did they put the map over there anyway?
Hear what you can do in Tears of the Kingdom? You can boot up the game, you can press start, you can sit there after pressing start.
Why does this wheel have so much filler?
You know what? How did I never think of that? Why is map up there? I mean, you don't think about it as much because the cardinal directions have you covered as far as the main stuff, because you've got Fusion, Ultra Hand. I'll actually bring it back up real quick. Oh, nope, don't lower volume.
Abilities through the fucking roof!
Let's bring it back up so we can show.
Kingdom? You can boot up the game, you can press start, you can sit there after pressing start.
Why does it...
Okay, because you've got Ultra Hand, Phase Through Ceiling, the Time Rewind, and Fusion. So all the big stuff is on the cardinal direction that you think to hit when you're going in a particular direction. If, oh, I want to go up, okay, go up. Actually, that's one of the nice things about that menu is that, oh, I want to go up, okay, go up on the analog. That's actually a nice touch. I don't know if that was intentional, but that's a nice touch. But all that to say, yeah, there's a lot of wasted space on there. You probably could have changed it around a little bit by removing the map and the amiibo integration, because I'm pretty sure one of these will eventually be for pre-built stuff, but I can't quite recall where that one falls. And I think another one is the camera. But to be fair, how much do we necessarily... Well, where would you put the camera otherwise? Because you've got the zoom-in feature for when you're putting down markers, but in theory you could just have that be this... Well, can't necessarily have that be the same image for the camera, but still.
Does this wheel have so much filler? Why
It's only two things that are filler, man.
is the map here when I can more quickly access it by hitting minus? Why is amiibo here when you can just put that in the pause menu? Like, when are we gonna need that at a moment's notice?
Okay, 25% of filler, but to be fair, that's still a lot.
And these being here increases my baffle output tenfold when there are so many things that would benefit from being selectable this way. Take, for example, the Sage abilities, your reward for beating the temples.
Oh, actually, you know what? You've got a fair point on that. The fact that you have to run to a particular Sage or Sage Phantom, whatever you want to call them, just to activate their ability. The only one that's not the case is Riju when you're... Well, not Riju. Why did I say Riju? Tulin. There it is. The only one that's not the case is Tulin when you're explicitly gliding. That's the only one you don't have to worry about that. Mostly because that's the only one you can use while you're gliding.
And what a reward they are. Congratulations, you saved the world.
Where are you going with this? Is this supposed to be slow motion?
This was cool. During my first temple, I found having a companion with a special ability to be really useful and wasn't looking forward to completing it and having to go back to how things were before. So to get the spirit of that companion as a reward and effectively having them by my side throughout the rest of the game was a treat. But
yep, I agree. I much prefer the sages to the champion abilities.
Then you get another, and another, and another.
And you can disable them whenever you like.
When you have all of them following you around and they clog up the screen, it can be overwhelming, but that's not even the half of it. To use their abilities, you have to walk up to each of them manually.
There you go.
And hit A, but since these are computer-controlled companions, sometimes they're not where you want them to be, or they're actively running away from you, or another one butts in front of the one you want and you activate the wrong ability. Having these guys follow you around and fight with you is nice.
How did I never think about that as an issue? Huh. I guess it wasn't a major issue for me, to be fair, but still.
It makes the adventure feel less lonely, and their abilities can be very useful. But this is...
Also, I'm surprised you kept that clip around since it looked like you were about to die, but never mind me.
Clunk 101! Did you ever go to Clunk School?
Open this...
I mean, yes, apparently they did, but... They went to Clunk School to become clunky, clearly.
Jar.
They did.
Okay, that one got me. That one got me.
You can turn each sage on or off from the pause menu.
Exactly.
Though their abilities are so useful at a moment's notice, I'm willing to put up with said clunk to just have them around at all times.
Okay, that's a good refutation of my argument. Excellent.
Though if they were a part of the ability wheel, it would be much easier to warrant doing this. I don't know. This game just made some funky decisions.
Well, how would you integrate it into the wheel, though? Because you could replace amiibo and map. You could maybe even replace camera, so that would leave, what, 9 spots? Well, to be fair, whenever you bring up that menu, it pauses the game, so that does give you ample time to worry about it. That would be difficult to code, though, given that you'd have to worry about them not always being active, so I could understand why they didn't do it from a coding standpoint, but still. The gamer isn't necessarily going to notice or care how hard something is to code. They aren't going to care that it is incredibly difficult to code Ultra Hand. They just want Ultra Hand to be cool. So in that count, irrespective of what we might want, that's the nature of the beast. So, yeah, fair enough.
With its interface. Speaking of which, spot the difference.
Is that a problem?
Yeah, this one's on the left.
After waiting over 6 years,
Okay, good
I
one.
was definitely excited to see what Nintendo did to address many complaints and issues with Breath of the Wild, while also improving the overall experience. Apparently the guy for that was out. Yeah.
They improved the game balance considerably by admittedly making it more linear and by giving you signposts of, hey, go check this area out first, but hey, it meant that I felt more comfortable exploring, so I like it.
When I look back at the complaints I had and the complaints others had, Tears of the Kingdom doesn't really fix much of this.
Which complaints did you have? Maybe I should check out your Breath of the Wild video at some point. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna find your... You know what? I will make a note to myself to find your Breath of the Wild video, and we'll make it the first thing we look at. Hang on. Alright, get the chat window out of the way so I can actually go to the correct document. Oh, that's not the right document. You know what? Let's just start closing stuff I don't need, right? Okay, get rid of that, get rid of that. Alright, I have that written down now. Hopefully I will remember, because this is tucked away somewhere that... actually, do I have the other thing? Close everything? Oh, close OBS? Okay. Yeah, you definitely want me doing that. Okay. Alright, there. That's something more centralized. Let's get rid of it from there. Oh, I guess I don't need this up anymore since I've got the link. Okay, we're good. Sorry about that, boys. Let's get back to it.
It's pretty much Breath of the Wild, warts and all, with a big fat layer of new stuff laid on top of it.
And some stuff taken away because Sheikah powers are gone, but that's beside the point.
User interface looks identical, and while
that's not a problem,
while it's functional, I think a redesign would have gone a long way.
How would you have redesigned it?
Per already reusing so much from the previous game here, the least you could do is choose a different font.
Why though? It's the same world. It's... Admittedly, you are dealing with different technology. Because if you're going to make so many aesthetic changes with, say, the Pura Pad from the Sheikah Slate, which they're functionally the same, even if they are aesthetically different, I could understand that perhaps, but at the same time, isn't this the same font they use for Echoes of Wisdom? Hang on a second. Actually, I should still have all my Echoes of Wisdom footage since I recorded it potentially to do a Let's Play out of it. Let me go looking around for that real quick. I should have all of my... There it is. Okay, give me a sec. Okay, so it's not exactly the same font. I'm immediately disproven. Although, maybe if I go to a menu? No. Oh, hang on. And it looks like a pretty similar font to me. Let's just bounce back and forth between these real quick. Yeah, it looks pretty similar to me. And those are two completely different worlds. This is just what they typically do, is they typically keep things fairly simple as far as the font, because they don't necessarily want to overcomplicate things or over-stylize. Not on something so essential, so... Not the most important thing to get obsessed over the font, but then again, it's a throwaway comment, so we won't read too much into that.
Inventory and map screens at least saw a few tweaks, but not enough to feel all that distinct or improved.
It feels very improved to me. A lot easier to navigate with it being more, well, okay, let me put it this way. Oh, let me make sure I'm on the right window. Honestly, it feels much improved to me because a lot more of the space is being used for items. Because that was an annoying thing for me, the fact that I could, well, that was an annoying part for me, the fact that I would use the right, in fact, when I was gathering Breath of the Wild footage for my Tears of the Kingdom review, I remember getting annoyed at the inventory in Breath of the Wild, which was a first, because, oh, I have to bump the right analog a bunch just to move on when I have a ton of a particular resource. I mean, if you see over here where he's got two blips for materials, or I think that's food specifically, or is that just materials in general? But either way, the fact that I have to hit right analog twice just to move on to the other part. So the fact that it's all just scrollable through here now is really helpful, especially since more of this, I can see more at a glance. So it is a minor tweak, but it's a tweak that I really like.
At least saw a few tweaks, but not enough to feel all that distinct or improved.
It is improved, trust me.
In fact, the only thing I originally thought they changed was the color here.
What?
Graphics, practically identical.
Not a problem.
I mean, from a technical standpoint, yes, they've made improvements, and while there's impressive tech and hard work behind them, it's all pretty damn subtle in practice. Without looking up the dirty details, this looks the same.
So?
Speaking of looking the same, that was my problem with the shrines in Breath of the Wild. When you have 120 mini-dungeons...
Well, that wasn't my only problem with the shrines. I was also annoyed at how samey the Divine Beast sections were, but we may get to that.
To complete, and they all look identical, it can become a bit grating. And in Tears of the Kingdom, thankfully, they gave us new interior and exterior designs for the shrines. For this game, every shrine still looks the same. What a lineup!
Okay, Brent, so this is an interface and graphics point, so we won't get it on him too much for not bringing this up, but honestly, I prefer the shrines in Tears of the Kingdom. There were a lot of good ideas within the shrines for Breath of the Wild, but you also have some of the obligatory gyro sections, given that they have to show off what the Switch is capable of with the Joy-Con. And you also have a decent amount of combat shrines where it's just fight this one guy, instead of what they did with Tears of the Kingdom and said, hey, fight these guys, but you have to make do with what's already here. You lose all your items until you complete this. So I feel that they did a better job with what they had in Tears of the Kingdom since that they had a second go at it. Though I will grant you that aesthetically, yeah, I wish they did fairy things up more. That's a fair point.
Weapon degradation? Something complained about to no end previously. It's still here. Hell, it's even worse.
Yes, but material fusion renders the reason for why it's a pain null and void. Why am I having to say this twice? Ugh. Okay, so, you know what? I will just bring that script back up real quick so I can just say my point then. Where is it? There it is. Okay, material fusion. Okay, so here it is. So this is what I said when responding to Synthetic Man. Weapon durability was my primary reason for disliking Breath of the Wild, as it felt like I was at the game's mercy for whether I had a suitable weapon to take on whatever I was happening across. It was a constant source of concern because while weapons might get handed out like candy, whether they'd be any use against the next group of enemies I was facing was another question entirely. When it comes to Tears of the Kingdom, there's an earlier point in the video I was responding to then, where weapons in the overworld have been, quote, nerfed significantly, with the original power level for Sane being found in the depths. I can't speak to how much they've been nerfed since it's been too long since I last played Breath of the Wild to completion, so we'll act on the assumption that's correct. We'll also assume a point about weapons breaking faster is correct, which isn't what I recall, but for the sake of argument, let's assume that's true. Despite those concessions, material fusion eliminated my biggest issue with weapon durability, namely that I was never sure if I was properly armed for whatever encounter I was wandering into next. While our inventory might be limited for weapons, our inventory for materials is not, which means regardless of where I went or what I found, there was a minimum level of power that I could raise any weapon in this game up to. That alone smoothed out the difficulty curve to where I felt much more free to explore and could get that feeling everyone else had while playing Breath of the Wild. Saying that weapon durability issues are somehow worse in Tears of the Kingdom is baffling to me. So yeah, there we are. That's my response to this point.
Pretty much every sword you pick up now is rusted, meaning they last not. But this is to incentivize you to fuse your weapons to make them more durable, which, in practice, I mean, sure, it works, but when you have to give us pretty much nothing but rusted weapons on the surface to get us to do it, it doesn't end up feeling like it makes a huge difference to me. But you can repair...
Well, the difference is, as I outlined earlier, that it means that you can bring any weapon in the game up to the same level of power, which means you have something more consistent to work with as you're exploring the rest of the world.
Your weapons by going up to Octoroks, dropping your weapon, having them suck it up, spit it back out, it'll be brand new, and often have a status buff. And how did I learn to do this? I didn't! This is such a hidden feature. You would only discover it by accident on your own, and you can
Wait, you can do that? Well, I guess that proves the point, doesn't it?
only do it once with each Octorok. So what, this solves everything? Well,
it solves a lot.
Head down to the depths. There, you can find non-rusted weapons, but goddamn, I gotta do all this to get more than 5 hits out of a sword? I
never found the weapon breaking that bad in Breath of the Wild. I always found new weapons. I could understand why they hand out weapons like candy and whatnot as a result of that, but I was never satisfied at the power level I was getting from those weapons, and the fact that even the good stuff that you get from the Divine Beasts ends up breaking too. The fact that the cool spear that you get from defeating the Zora Divine Beasts can break, that's bullshit.
I always appreciated weapon degradation. I felt it pushed you to be creative and act on the spot in combat once a weapon broke.
I hated it.
Forcing you to try all the weapons in the game rather than sticking to only a handful, and with the introduction
I hated it.
of Fuse, this is pushed even further. Now, it's all about this. A weapon about to break? Experiment. Combine it with something to keep it alive for just a bit longer and...
Or lead with that, but never mind me.
Hey, you may discover a great weapon setup that way. I think this is all ingenious, but it doesn't really solve my problem with weapon degradation. I just wanted them to last a little bit longer.
Well, if you can just tack the same material onto a different weapon, it becomes a lot less relevant, so not a problem for me, but fair enough.
Now, they last shorter by default, and I gotta do all this junk for them to be usable past, like, one enemy. This solution is perfect on paper. It keeps the game balanced with breakable weapons while offering a solution that still promotes experimentation. But because 95% of the weapons are rusted and on average last shorter than Breath of the Wild, I feel like we're sort of back where we started. Climbing in the rain is still a no-go, though you can find clothing with slip resistance.
Couldn't you already do that, or is that something new? I can't recall.
Much like how I found this bulletproof vest.
Well, this doesn't
Okay. Okay, that gag got me, fair enough.
do a damn thing. I just feel like Tears of the Kingdom doesn't really improve on much from Breath of the Wild. Rather, introduces a ton of stuff which can in theory improve issues from that game, but those issues are still there, and if they actually end up improving them, it's a bit situational sometimes.
I treat the weapon durability as a necessary evil in Tears of the Kingdom and just hate it in Breath of the Wild.
Oh my god, Scott. It has to be opposite day where you are because you actually think we give a about your Tears of the Kingdom opinions?
See, this makes you look, well, this makes you look oversensitive to other people's opinions when you make statements like this. Again, I don't want to belabor that whole point since I was a little overly rambly on it already, but you don't need this.
Nerd emoji looking fuck.
I've been feeling damn good lately, but I know I need to balance my emotions more, so thank you for hurting me.
Okay, that one I'll grant you, but admittedly, you guys don't hold back sometimes with feedback, but still, if it's that much of a problem, it's called shutting the internet off. Slip resistance is only in Tears of the Kingdom, fair enough.
Hey Scott, this is Matthew from Tucson, Arizona. I don't actually care about Tears of the Kingdom, but I have to ask you, have you ever paid...
See, you don't need to strawman people's arguments like that. That's gonna just inflame people even more than they already were inflamed if they really are as bad as you claim.
...your taxes?
Hey Scott, what does the C in Scott stand for? Fucking idiot?
No, it stands for thank you for your input.
Tears of the Kingdom is a brand new game, not something that could have just been an update or an expansion pack. It's its own entity, there's no getting around that. And because of that, its insistence on following Breath of the Wild's format holds it back tremendously in my opinion.
Is it? Does it really, though? Yes, it is very similar in a lot of ways, but it is also a direct continuation of the same world. Is it necessarily a problem that it borrows so much?
It hits the exact same bullet points of what you did in the previous game.
And I like Tears of the Kingdom more because it was better as far as game balance. Next point.
The tutorial section involves going to 4 shrines to get your abilities. Then you have to go to 4 different regions on the map to basically do the dungeons of the game.
And the dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom are much improved. Move on.
While find Koroks hiding in the same types of places, which...
Those did get repetitive. Tears of the Kingdom was a downgrade on that. There were too many that required Ultra Hand and just moving them slowly.
Collecting them does the same exact thing they did in Breath of the Wild, much like running around finding the tears, which is this game's memories.
Well, the memories are a hell of a lot easier to find this time around since you're not contingent on the camera.
And the shrines complete the shrines, they do the exact same thing they did in the previous game.
And there's a lot of upgrades that used to be handled through dungeons, so that's not necessarily a problem, unless you want to go back to the older system.
But when you find the Master Sword, oh, it's completely different this time around. You need more stamina to regain it instead of hearts.
So?
Who are you?
So much of what you do in Tears of the Kingdom follows the exact same template as Breath of the Wild, and I get it, it's a sequel. I was expecting it to follow a lot of the same tropes, but I mean, beat for beat, this follows that game too closely. This structure worked great in Breath of the Wild, and it works fine here, but honestly, this all felt more natural in that game. Why were you going to the 4 different regions there? Why, to free the 4 divine beasts, because your goal is to waltz into Hyrule Castle and eliminate Calamity Ganon right from the start. But going to these 4 regions and completing these help you become stronger and make Calamity Ganon weaker. Why are you going to the 4 different regions in Tears of the Kingdom?
Alright, we're getting into story, so presumably you'll go into more depth, and so the way you've laid it out, I can see your argument. Well, I can guess at your argument, I should say, as it's a matter of saying, hey, there were very specific there's very specific localized calamities happening here because of the divine beasts, and but with respect to this game, it's just, hey, random monsters showed up in part of world we aren't as familiar with because, hey, difference has occurred as a result of whatever upheaval has just happened. So one could argue that we should have had something else thrown in similar to that at Hateno or Kakariko or somewhere else like that to try and make it seem less arbitrary. Or perhaps make one of the disasters happen at one of those places instead of just a side quest you may be able to visit at one point. Though, to be fair, you eventually do need to see, is it Hateno? I think it's Kakariko, where you have to go for the clue in order to find the 5th sage, if I'm remembering correctly, though correct me if I'm wrong.
To waste my goddamn time, the story in Tears of the Kingdom was treated as if it was so much more in-depth and better than Breath of the Wild. While, in my opinion, I honestly think it's more shallow and far worse.
That's going to be an interesting take. I'm not sure how I would compare them, because Breath of the Wild starts off on an interesting note in that you follow 100 years later from a major defeat. It certainly starts out more interesting, though the problem that you run into with that structure, and the main thing that holds it back for me, is the fact that, hey, you want me to get very invested in learning about the champions, but their fates are already sealed. We know where things are going from there, so apart from just watching their souls finally be at rest, or their spirits, or whatever you want to call it, there's not really all that far we can go with that. I think the one that could arguably have the most impact would be Mipha, given that Sidon is still around, and given how long-lived the Zora are, but that's about it. So, it starts out interesting, but I don't know if it necessarily carries through. Tears of the Kingdom, I'm not sure where I would put that, relatively speaking, because it's an interesting idea, having another group show up and influence things within Hyrule. But the problem that you run into is that where the hell were they for everything? The most logical point where you could probably put them would be sometime after Skyward Sword, as then Hylians are on the ground, you've had time for the dust to settle after Demise, all that sort of thing. So it would make sense shortly after that, especially since I don't think they would immediately form the Kingdom of Hyrule as soon as they descend from Skyloft, so it would have to be sometime around then, but if you were somehow in the sky the whole time and only just now came down, who sent you? Why now? So there's a lot of ambiguity created around the Zonai existing in the first place. First, we already had the Sheikah, which are a known entity within the Zelda universe, given that they've been around for a long time, but now we're introducing another element that could gum up the works even further. So, in that sense, I like the idea that they're going with for Tears of the Kingdom as well, and I do like Sonia and I'm forgetting the king's name. Crap. Rauru, there it is. I was thinking Dimitri for a second because same actor. Again, listening to those flashbacks, it was like listening to a Crimson Flower route with the Flame Emperor lost. Yes, I am talking Fire Emblem. Dimitri and Rhea just sitting across from each other talking normally. What happened? What didn't happen, more to the point. Either way, so I'm not sure which I would pit as better. Because on one hand, Tears of the Kingdom doesn't have the main issue that I had with Breath of the Wild, where you have issues with the main characters, the champions. We know that their fate is sealed. And so any investment we could get into them would be a matter of, oh, it's tragic that you passed, but okay. To where I only really felt something with them once that I was replaying it a little bit for some footage on the Tears of the Kingdom video. Well, the review I put out on my review channel. I only felt something after that, and that was after playing through Tears of the Kingdom and Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. So that might have just been my perception at the time, to be fair, but that was also after having spent a lot more time with, well, I think the one I did for the Tears of the Kingdom video was Mipha's Divine Beast, so that was after spending a lot of time with her in Age of Calamity, a lot of time with Sidon in Tears of the Kingdom. So then, it's hard to know whether it was just perception or just I know you a lot better now, so I know how tragic this is in actuality, but still. You avoid that by having us focus more on immediate events outside of the flashback scenes. But at the same time, I do wonder. Although, to be fair, arguably you run into the same problem with Rauru and Sonia being dead, so... tomato, tomato, I suppose. Either way, let's see what you have to say.
Breath of the Wild's plot was really basic. However,
yep.
I would never call it bad.
Yep, that's fair.
I think it was perfect for what they were trying to do. And practically everything was optional. You didn't need to complete the Divine Beast, you didn't need to find the memories, you could do whatever you want, so I can tell how difficult it was to craft a story around this. But they did it. It's very simple, though has some great character moments, and the concept of Link suffering from amnesia and having to piece together memories by finding locations and recalling certain scenes worked well with the non-linear setup of the game. These memories make sense to be seen out of order because that's how you regain memories. Oftentimes, you just remember a certain thing that happened. Don't know what happened before, what happened after, just that. And it's not like these memories are revealing any vital story details you need to know. It's all supplemental. You already know what happened at the end of the day, so what these are more focused on is showcasing Zelda as a character, who she was, what she was interested in, what she struggled with, how her and Link interacted, which makes the drive to rescue her that much greater. As time passes, I respect how this game does story more and more.
I felt that it was a bit too hard to find all of those memories, but that was just me. And to be fair, again, I wasn't having all that much fun with Breath of the Wild when I played it, so my bare minimum focus of, okay, I just want to find these already, probably meant that I was going in with the wrong attitude. So, I'll concede that point.
Though, once again, the story itself, nothing groundbreaking. I mostly think it's good because it works incredibly well in tandem with how Breath of the Wild is designed as a game. Tears of the Kingdom ever f around with an antonym? This story is lame as hell, man. Just, it isn't a good time with the gameplay like with Breath of the Wild, but it's also not good in its own right. Zelda is captured by the resurrected corpse of the Demon King, and Link...
Well, captured is a strong word to use for that, but never mind me.
Link is nearly killed in the process, awaking with a replaced arm courtesy of the spirit of the first king of Hyrule, the goat with abs. Go down to Lookout Landing and Purah tells you, man, you should check out those 4 regions you already went to in the last game to get some answers as to what the hell is going on here. So you go to a region, you see Zelda walking around in the distance ominously, doing evil in the sort. Everybody goes, is that Princess Zelda? Why would she...
Okay, I will grant you, that is a fair point against Tears of the Kingdom. They repeat the whole missing princess and driving you into sudden danger and dragging you along. Actually, now that I think of it, they could have done a lot more if Zelda hadn't... Well, if the Phantom Zelda had actually done more than just exist nearby and drive you into a specific direction. If there was some kind of trap that you got lured into, or some obvious instance where, oh, she whispers sweet nothings into your ear and drives you off into some insane circumstance to where you never know if it's the real one. Perhaps she even has some of Zelda's memories. There's a lot you could have arguably done with this. Oh man, there's a lot of potential you could have done with this. Holy crap, they missed out on a lot. They could have done a lot with that. Okay, yeah, you might have... That alone might have just cinched it for Breath of the Wild being the superior story, actually, because that's a lot of wasted potential right there.
She'd be doing such things. You do some stuff for them, you end up at one of the dungeons, do that, the boss pops up, which usually doesn't feel impactful. Many of these...
I really liked the first one I did, which was for the Rito, because that was more of a skill check to get us used to the gameplay, since you have Purah very strongly suggest, wait, go in that direction first. So, you go in that direction first, and it's more of a skill check rather than a straight fight. Though, admittedly, it does take a while to whittle down the health bars of the other 3, so you want to say that they're not very impactful since that it can take arguably too long to whittle them down, instead of what you had in prior games where, oh, if we're going back to something more traditional, why does it take us so long to whittle it down? Though, the problem you run into there is that since you can tackle these at any point, there's only so much they can do about it, because, I mean, the video I responded to last time with respect to Tears of the Kingdom went to Zora's Domain first, instead of the Rito Village. So, very different circumstance. He probably had a much harder time getting through that particular fight than I did. So, there's no way to know for certain.
These felt about as evil and threatening as a Hinox you'd find dozens of times in the open world. The different variations of Ganon boss fights in Breath of the Wild got old, yeah, but in the context of what was going on in that game, they felt like a bigger deal. You beat everything, an ancestor of your partner from that region appears and tells you what happened all those years ago and lends them their secret stone.
And admittedly, the sages should have given us merely a piece of the story each, or given more of a unique perspective of how they were recruited, or literally anything but just repeating the story but with a slight twist on it. That I'll also grant you.
I hope that sounded interesting.
Because if it didn't, that's on me. I need to learn how to spin bullshit stories better.
But
yeah, you do need to learn how to spin bullshit stories better. I could give you, well, okay. I shouldn't say that because then it'll be demanded of me, but there are better ways to spin that. Give me about an hour.
Also because it's the same damn thing in each of the regions.
Yep.
And why am I doing all of this? For research?
Because you don't know where Zelda is, you don't know how to fix whatever's going on. It's not necessarily this, and you don't exactly know what caused all of these, why they all happened at the same time. There is reason to be concerned out of all of these, and there is reason to dig further into them. The quote research is necessary and relevant. So I will push back on you being dismissive about, for research? Yes! How else are you going to know how to respond to this? It's not as if Link, well, arguably Link could just jump right back down below Hyrule Castle and try and deal with that, but you saw what happened the last time. Surely we'd want to know more about the threat before we go jump back down there again, especially since if you don't fight any of those bosses, they show back up right as you're about to confront Ganondorf, so... Yes, for research, yes.
After the first region, I think I have a pretty good idea of what's happening. And
even so, that doesn't mean you don't want to make sure for certain.
Everybody's constantly befuddled as to why Zelda would be doing all of this. But Link has seen all of this from the very start. He saw the resurrection, Zelda falling, but we just let everybody else put it together first. Which, can I just ask, who the hell is Link as a character at this point?
He is main character. Next question.
The entire series,
he is self-insert. Next question.
Been considered the link between the player and the game. And up until Breath of the Wild, you can name him whatever you wanted. He never spoke, really driving home how Nintendo viewed him like a sort of avatar, a stand-in for the player. However, Breath of the Wild broke one of many series traditions by not allowing you to name Link. He was just Link. He's officially his own character now. He's not you, he's not me, he's not shit in my pants Jerry, he's Link.
Calm down.
So why doesn't he act like it, damn it? It's
because he is still the self-insert that is meant to be silent while we silently ponder what's going on as well. They're still going the whole silent protagonist bit. Hell, we even, well, honestly, that just seems to be a staple that they're holding for Zelda in general with, well, Zelda games in general, I should say. The fact that Zelda was voiceless for Echoes of Wisdom. Though, arguably she shouldn't have been, given that she and Link clearly do speak in Tears of the Kingdom and Echoes of Wisdom, respectively. One does wonder, though, because is that a limitation they should break? I can't believe I'm countenancing that, but you know what? I'm one of those weirdos who think Gordon Freeman should have spoken in Half-Life 2, so you know what? I'll be that guy. So, should Link be given more dialogue than just, hey, yeah? Huh. Because the problem is that everybody's going to have their own idea as to how he should speak. And that's the reason why people are always hesitant to give the typically silent protagonist a speaking role. In fact, if memory serves, there was a dev interview for Echoes of Wisdom where they were considering giving Link some actual dialogue outside of maybe when he's controlled by somebody, just as Link speaking to us. But the problem is that when he has been the voiceless protagonist for so long, just saying bare minimum or not really, well, let me put it this way. How you explain something can tell us a lot about you. To give an example, since I brought up Fire Emblem Three Houses a couple of times, when the house leaders are introducing their fellow classmates, all three of them take a very different tact about it. Edelgard is a very straightforward assessment, Dimitri is very complimentary, Claude is very snarky. So, as you are learning about the other characters and getting a blurb about each of them, you're also learning a decent amount about the house leaders. You're learning about both at the same time because of how they're delivering the information to you. That is something that Link has never had because he's remained a silent protagonist. So, there would be tremendous risk in giving him a speaking voice, and I suspect that's also, well, but is that? Although the fact that they're withheld Zelda from having a speaking voice too would suggest that they're just treating it as a tradition at this point, just as a matter of course. But how would Link even deliver the information if we had him deliver it directly? That is the answer they would have to figure out, and I'm not sure how best they would handle that. Well, I'm not sure how best to handle that. Let's put it that way. Interesting. I make for an interesting writing exercise if I need practice for something.
It's so odd to me that the games where Link is an actual character, he has significantly less character than in the games where he's supposed to be more of a blank slate for the player. Now, I feel that over time, the developers sort of stopped viewing Link as this and just kept letting you name the character, for example, because every Zelda did. You look at a game like Wind Waker with the most expressive Link of all time, or Skyward Sword with a genuine love story between him and Zelda. You can't tell me Nintendo believes this Link's name is Scott Wozniak, because if they do, well, I have a legal case to make. But it's just baffling how this Link, who is entirely his own character, definitively named Link, just stands there for the most part with a blank stare, which is 10 times more irritating when I have to view possessed Zelda walking around and act like I don't know what's going on.
Alright, that's fair enough. You arguably should have him more expressive, though if you're going to make comments about how everybody was annoyed at Skyward Sword for being too linear, could you argue that they went this direction to have something more grounded, to where you don't have the big expressions that you saw with Skyward Sword? Because I think the one that stands out is just how expressive his Link is when I think he's when he's falling off of Skyloft at one point, or when something's about to fall on him. I can't remember the exact cutscene, but it was early in the Skyloft. I can't remember exactly where, but I remember the expressions and a lot of the facial expressions just in general being very exaggerated or just, well, very expressive for lack of a better word, but still. Is this a matter of just, once again, an overcorrection regarding that, perhaps? Given that they did take a more serious given that they are treating this much more seriously? It could be.
4 times.
Doesn't necessarily make it good, by the way.
Yes, let me hear what this ghost has to say about the imprisoning war, which consists of people standing around Ganondorf and Zelda saying, "Don't worry, Link will save everything."
Yeah, again, they should have done different pieces of this for each one. Heck, you could have even done different parts of the battle if you were willing to actually animate the battles themselves. Actually, that could have been a good way to showcase it. Just show their particular contribution to the battle itself. Even if the main beats, even the visual change would have made a major difference. Jeez. Why didn't they just stand around? You know what? Fair enough.
Multiple times. There's nothing new that's ever learned from any of these. They all say the same thing.
Yep.
That's just the first 40 hours, so it picks up later, I promise.
Just the first 40 hours. I mean, I spent 90 with it, and, well, to be fair, I did. What did I enjoy more? Did I enjoy the first 40 hours more, or the last 50? Good question, actually. You should play Wind Waker? At some point.
Littered throughout the world are the tears, which will show what Zelda's been up to, which, like I said, replace the memories from the previous game. Since you're finding these randomly throughout the game, there's no way around it. You're gonna find them out of chronological order. The memories worked in this regard. The tears? I don't think so, man.
I think they do, actually. I'm gonna be that guy and say that they do. Well, they do and don't. So, the example I brought up with respect to my Tears of the Kingdom review is that since that he's marked it as spoilers, I'm going to act on the assumption that you've played this game. I retrieved the Master Sword before I got the final Sage, which meant I got the cutscene of Zelda transforming into the dragon before I even was told through explicit dialogue that that was the plan. They overemphasized the flashbacks to where it's obvious that that's what they're going to do, but there was still that, wait, you wouldn't, that I had in the moments of, oh, you actually did. Oh, that's how you're around now. Oh, crap. you must. And then as I was going back to some old footage, as I was preparing for the Synthetic Man video, and I was saying that, oh wait, Link, you must find me, and then you see the dragon. Okay, well played, well freaking played. But the problem is that not everyone's going to experience it in that way, given the circumstances. So it worked great for me. And honestly, for the majority of these cutscenes, I think it's fine to see them out of order. I think it's perfectly acceptable to see most of the cutscenes out of order. That one is the one exception.
Man, so these showcase Zelda after becoming stuck in the past and meeting and working with Abgo and wife who's okay with that. This is a pretty straightforward story of Zelda and the King and Queen of Hyrule trying to stop Ganondorf that has no benefit to being viewed out of order. I don't understand why they did this outside of, it's what Breath of the Wild did. And honestly, there's nothing really interesting I learned from these outside of the Master Sword is a girl? You know?
I mean, we already knew that though, didn't we? I mean, we had Skyward Sword right there.
I know exactly what's going on in this story at almost every second, which makes the forced mystery of what's going on just tiresome. I've seen many allude to how this game has a far better narrative than Breath of the Wild, but I disagree. I bet it feels that way just because the game pretends to care about story more, but all it boils down to is a plot that has nothing to really say. It's not bad. I just call it kinda lame. Something that does the job it needed to do, but in a way that felt far more forced than its predecessor.
I could see that, given that the gimmick wouldn't be wholly necessary for the flashbacks, though. Honestly, I don't think it's that big of a deal if they're viewed out of order, given how disconnected a lot of the scenes are from each other. So, in that sense, I disagree, but fair enough for the rest. Alright, we've already critiqued why I don't think these scenes, well, this bit is a good idea, so we'll just move on.
Alright, answer me this, bitch. Have you ever woken up in the morning and tried having a good opinion?
Thank you for your input. Unfortunately, I've always wanted to have bad opinions and not wake up.
See, I know it's a joke, but people are still going to take that as you strawmanning people who disagree with you. This is not going to be this is not a good idea.
Hey Scott, your opinion on Tears of the Kingdom is so bad, my wife left me.
You could just be critiquing the game instead of doing this right now, you know.
Thanks for that, asshole.
It's touching when somebody says I affected their life.
Okay, that's a good joke at least, but still, this is pointless. Get back to the critique.
Go f*** yourself.
Tears of the Kingdom's big hook getting a grand reveal at E3 2021, being the focal point of the boxer and basing the tutorial on it, the sky, man, f*** this thing. Well, at least in the sense
okay, throwing the gun instead of shooting it, you know what? Respect, that's a good bit.
that it really isn't as big of a deal as they made it seem.
That is entirely fair. The marketing did give it the impression of it being bigger than it is, and to be fair, there is a lot to explore up there, but there's arguably more to explore down in the depths, if only by virtue of sheer landmass.
What's a bigger deal is the verticality of the game, going up
Ooh, okay, you're spinning this in a direction I didn't expect. Alright, let's go with it.
crazy high and being able to regain your footing on a sky island to plan your next move, which is great, but the sky islands aren't what's great here. What is the point of these? They're not that prevalent, and when they are, there's oftentimes nothing of note to do on them.
To be fair, the only one that is arguably strictly necessary, and even then technically not necessary, is... which one is the one? Let's see, so there's 2 points where you go into the Sky Islands for dungeons. I think it's Rito Village and Zora's Domain. So if you're going the completionist route, then yeah, you're going to end up on those. Or even if you're just going main story route, you'll invariably end up on both of those. And it can be interesting to look around, especially for the low gravity sections and Zora's Domain when you're dealing with that. That was a neat little gimmick, just to shake things up there. Especially with how they handled traversal for those small bits of water that were suspended in the air. That was cool. But either way, fair enough to mention that, hey, once that you're past the Great Sky Island, you can technically ignore it. Fair enough to mention that. Although, by that standard, there's a lot you can ignore in the Great Plateau and in Breath of the Wild in general. So the fact that you can ignore it, it's not necessarily a problem given what you've said about Breath of the Wild.
That opening section, that's it. That's the sky's magnum opus. I was expecting an aha moment, but what we got was pretty much just random floating platforms in the sky. Many
Admittedly, they could have done more to add story components, perhaps if more of the Guardians remained, or if there were somehow people that had gotten lifted up there that you had to go rescue. Oh, actually, that could have been a neat little side quest, although you run into potentially the same issues as you would with the Koroks that require you to use the Ultra Hand, which take for freaking ever.
which feel copy and pasted, and even then, there aren't a ton of them, so advertising this as a key part of the game when this is the finalized map of the sky?
To be fair as well, you can't have that much up there without throwing off the pacing of the Sky Islands in general. It's very much treated in-game as something special to do occasionally, but yeah, in that sense, the marketing definitely was off from what we expected. Fair enough to critique it on that point, though honestly, I don't necessarily have a problem with what is present in the Sky Islands. Even if you added maybe 50% more in here, the issue you run into is that you then have it completely dominate the sky. There's no longer just sky, there's just a ton of islands that you eventually reach, and you could end up overly distracting yourself from all the stuff that's also going on down on the surface. So arguably you end up throwing a wrench in the gears if you put on too much as well. So I'm not sure how best you would balance it.
Like, there's so much dead space. So you'd assume what
Because it's the sky.
is there is finally crafted to be as purposeful and worthwhile
How did Sidon get up there?
as possible. Well, here's the Sky Island.
Yes, they could have done more to have, say, people on the islands that you have to go retrieve, or have more of those instances where you have to retrieve an item in order to get one of the shrines working. They could have done more. That is fair.
And here's the point. Oh no!
I like that these
Okay, that's a bit overdoing it.
are here, but they feel like a giant missed opportunity. Like, there should be something more to these, because at the moment, whenever I land on one, oftentimes there's nothing there. The best use for them...
Well, you were just shown one of the things that you can move around and need to move around for one of the shrines, so that's not strictly true, but I understand your point.
honestly, is to get a good look at everything from incredibly high vantage points, which for a game like this is incredibly useful, so I don't want to downplay that. But at that point, they're functionally the same as the towers from the previous game. They're just higher up now, and when it comes to what there is to do on them, I was just expecting more than... oh my god, a frog! The more substantial...
Okay, that one got me. Fair enough. You miss a joke and then you get me back. Alright, that seems to be the trend for this.
layer of the world in comparison is easily the depths.
Yep.
Which were a big surprise to everyone playing their first time. I mean, these weren't discussed at all pre-release. And that first time you dive in here, it is jaw-dropping.
Oh,
Considering
you're about to burn if you're going right above there.
this is the same world as Breath of the Wild, but now has not only a world above it, but a world below, all running on technology that's the equivalent of boiled relish.
That's better than I thought.
To go from the highest point possible all the way down to the depths in real time is incredible. There's no getting around that. But when I'm actually down there, this is fucking awesome! I think the depths are an amazing...
Huh, interesting. That was not the take I expected. I expected you to go after it for being samey, but then again, you do have a lot, well, you have a lot more that's connected, so the struggle moving around there isn't keep your stamina or Zonai devices in good enough shape to where you can get from one island to the next, or, oh, I want to go over there. It's easier to access it from a sky island, so let's go there and then head back to the surface. Here it's a matter of, oh, we've got Gloom, we've got more powerful enemies, we've got a lot of different weapons that aren't degraded, so there's reason to go down here and risk all this. There's specific materials we can get down here. There's a bunch of bomb flowers everywhere. So actually, you know what? This take makes sense to me now. Never mind that. Never mind me.
Addition. But after that initial shock of being able to go down here and all the
Okay, mind me a little bit. I do like views, but still, I do like attention on here.
materials you can...
Yes, I have to mention it. Okay, let's go back to where I'm not just being silly.
actually down there, this is fucking awesome! I think the depths are an amazing addition, but after that initial shock of being able to go down here and all the materials you can find, there's really not a lot going on. Not enough
Okay. Got a little too ahead of myself, apparently.
actual things to do outside of keep moving forward in the dark, and when I find something like a giant boss, I spend so much time trying to take it down, wasting loads of my inventory to end up getting basically nothing worthwhile in return. This area is massive, but everything just looks the same.
Yep, that is a concern. Although, I did enjoy running around down there, especially once I found out from a live stream, well, when I was live streaming it, that hey, every shrine on the surface has a matching route down below, so there was a certain degree of fun of just having the game open and slowly whittling away at it while working on a podcast, but at the same time, it's a Zelda game, I'd expect more than that.
Especially early on when it's pitch black and you're fumbling around in the dark before you realize to use the Bright Bloom seeds.
Oh, what I ended up doing to get through most of the depths is what I would do is I would get a hot air balloon and a fire source, as always, get as high up as possible so I could actually get a good vantage to where any issues with terrain were basically null and void, to where I could see the next route, and then I would just use the glider in order to get over there, and then just rinse and repeat until I got over there. So that eliminated the overwhelming majority of the challenge navigating around and made it just basically just, all right, watch it play out, watch the wheel spin. So arguably I took the most lame way to cross it after a while, but then again, it did take me a while to reach that point. Hell, that was probably where a good chunk of the extra time I spent with the game went.
But even after you illuminate everything, this all feels auto-generated. I like going down here
wouldn't
for
go
a
that
change
far.
of pace and to collect better materials, but
I wouldn't necessarily go that far, given that there were definitely interesting points that are completely separate from the rest, such as on one of the islands, or one of the swirls that we saw a while back. Oh, hang on, brother, you left the dude in here.
Didn't know if he wanted it to hang out with you or go back outside.
It's the statesman. You know what? He doesn't like to stay inside all that much. He probably just expected me to get up and let him out. You should make an air bike. When was the last time I put the cartridge in? Do I still have it here? Oh, well, there's the Echoes of Wisdom box. I should put that back on the shelf. Either way, back on topic. Sorry about me getting distracted by the cat. Let's move on.
But that's kind of it. There's not enough productive activities to do down here for me to feel like I'm doing anything more than just wasting my time. At least this game has actual dungeons now.
Yep.
Or does it?
Where are you going with this?
I do think the Divine Beast caught a lot of flack, and much of it was justified.
Yes.
But looking back, my main problem stems from how they all look the same visually. The concept of a dungeon being inside a giant robot animal and moving a part of the animal to then change the map.
Well, see, hang on a sec. Let me close that door again. Okay, now that hopefully there will be less noise coming from the kitchen. So, the issues I have, the two main issues I have with the Divine Beasts, well, okay, there's a bunch of issues to be fair, but as far as the dungeon design itself, the visual component is a major reason why I dislike it. Another major reason is that from a design standpoint, they're very similar. It's a matter of rotate piece of large animal in order to reach a spot, or manipulate some aspect of it, which ends up very samey after a while. Arguably, you could make similar points about Tears of the Kingdom, where, find the 5 spots, but the way you do so tends to be more varied, at least from my experience. So I'd be curious to see what comparisons he comes up with for if he's going to make the "or do they" comment.
Map layout on the fly is pretty damn cool. It's just, obviously these could have been so much more. An actual dungeon in a traditional Zelda game is so intricate and large with unique visual and audible identity. The Divine Beasts were all pretty much the same thing, just a different layout. For Tears of the Kingdom, I wanted dungeons that were as robust as they were in games like Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword.
But you can't get that without the item system, and you can't have that necessarily with the ability to go anywhere at any time because you don't know what you have access to. And I made this point when I was reviewing it myself later on, well, long after this video, where I think I had singled out a dungeon in Skyward Sword as an example where, hey, I know that I have, the developers know the exact order you're getting all the powers, which means they also know the exact order in which to ramp up the complexity and combine stuff like the bomb and the beetle in order to make something novel later down the line. Twilight Princess, no. Tears of the Kingdom, found it eventually, does eventually vary things up, can't necessarily make those options, especially since pretty much any of the sage powers, one, you can go at any of the dungeons at any time, and the sage powers can technically be achieved by just, I think the only one that this doesn't apply to is Tulin, The other Sage abilities basically just say, hey, you want an easy way to blow stuff up, or you want an easy way to apply a water effect, or you want an easy way to shock someone without having to do material fusion, or get out an item, or go hunting for same. Here, Sage power. Tulin and the final Sage shake that up. I think her name is Minoru. So Tulin and Minoru shake that up in that, hey, here's a unique power to push you along when you're flying, and hey, here's a mecha, because why the hell not, that you can ride along and give weapons that you've collected and all that fun stuff and do real cool things there. So there is some uniqueness from the Sages, but the problem is that there's no instance where you would, say, use Yunobo's power to clear out something in the Gerudo Temple. I think it's called the Lightning Temple in-game. And because of that, there's only so far that you can get the intricate dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom without going back to the linear structure. And you saw that a little bit with Echoes of Wisdom, where they do have somewhat of the same issue given the number of echoes, but because they know, okay, this one always appears at this point, well, Hyrule Castle always appears after you have seen to both the Gerudo Desert and Jabul Waters, which means we know what tools you have and can tailor the dungeon accordingly. So that is the risk you take when you make it open world. It's going to be very difficult to create those intricate dungeons without potentially just stonewalling you because you didn't find the boomerang in cave number 57.
These are basically divine beasts again. You just called them temples. These aren't bad whatsoever. I think they're all well designed and can have some really great ideas. But these ain't anywhere near as good as other dungeons throughout the series.
Nor would I expect them to be based on everything I outlined.
I think the main problem is they all follow the same format. Go to these 5 waypoints, turn something on, and well...
Yep, that's a fair complaint. I wish they had put more variety to where it was, even if they had just had 2 major points that you had to seriously work for, that would have been, even that alone would have at least been something.
Each of these have some really cool gimmicks and puzzles to make them more memorable than the Divine Beasts.
Yep.
Now, oftentimes, the journey to these temples is incredible, but the temples themselves...
Well, I mean, that was the case for the Divine Beasts as well, wasn't it? The fact that you had to go through all these different steps. For instance, going after Mipha's Divine Beast, the fact that you have to ride atop Sidon's back in order to get over there, and I can't remember and then for, I think it was the Gerudo Desert, where you have to go sand seal surfing. Admittedly, very similar gimmicks on that count, on the 2 that I'm recalling first, well, off the top of my head, but still, you end up with very different dangers associated with them, given the different climates and all that fun stuff, so that was already there. It was just the dungeons themselves that were the issue.
I just feel like they're missing something. While they're more distinct from one another than in Breath of the Wild, they're still pretty bland in comparison to other games.
And you can still cheese them a little bit with the powers you have.
Following the exact same template as one another, the boss fights not being anything too compelling, these don't feel as finely crafted as something like a Skyward Sword dungeon. And while these are good, these are more Divine Beast than traditional dungeon, in my opinion.
Yep, you will beg for Skyward Sword before the end. Okay, enough of me being snarky.
Hey, Scott. I'm just calling in with my barbershop choir with this little message. And 1, 2, 3, 4. You're just plain correct and dumb.
Very cute. And hurtful. I'm in pain.
Again, you don't need to do this.
Hey, Scott. First-time viewer, long-time caller here. You know, I've agreed with you up until this point, but did you ever consider that we both might be f***ing idiots?
Hey!
Okay, that one I'll grant you. That one I will grant you. Okay. I don't know why that one got me, but that one got me. Okay. Well played. Well played. Okay. The bit went on for longer than it needed to be. Arguably, you didn't need it at all. But arguably, it was worth it for that bit.
The frame rate? It can get a little spunky.
Yeah, that is true. At least the game speed doesn't slow down, at least so far as I can tell. But, yeah. It should at least hold 30 FPS. 60 would be preferable, but I know the Switch hardware. But you're talking to a PC gamer. I expect 60.
Never unplayable whatsoever, but it is something that could be improved upon. Much like the resolution, which, I don't know, man, things sometimes look more pixelated than Breath of the Wild, which is fair considering how much more this game does, but it's still a little disappointing. The voice acting is pretty much of a similar quality to the predecessor, which means it's okay.
Yeah, I'd say okay is a fair assessment. There's some decent voice acting in there. There's some that's very stilted. I mean, I like Sidon as a character. The voicing is a little stilted, honestly, but still.
But we just have a lot of awkward deliveries. But I wish there was more of it. For this duology finally introducing voice acting to mainline Zelda, they don't use it a lot.
You could argue that's a good thing, because it is something very different from what they've done before, so you don't necessarily want to rock the boat that much. But yeah, I do wish there was more of it. I mean, even just, well, once you open that box, it's very hard to close it. I mean, I keep bringing up Fire Emblem because I talk about it a lot and spend a lot of time with it, but just going from 3 houses where everything outside of a few menu bits is voice acted, to even 3 Hopes, the Warrior spin-off of that game, where the exploration dialogue is no longer voiced. I'm sat there going, huh, I miss it. Where were my pretty voices? Damn it, I liked you all. I mean, I still like you all. The supports are at least fully voiced, which, thank God, but still, once that you open that box, it is very difficult to close it. So, best to ease into it until you know what exactly people are expecting. Let's put it that way.
Still have giant walls of text to read here, which is kind of the point of wanting Zelda to move in this direction. They only use it in a handful of cutscenes and just for specific points in the dungeons where your partner says, oh, looks like we only have this many things left to do.
Yeah, that's another reason why you need to be careful with it. Honestly, that part confused me. Why dialogue for that explicitly and not for major story points? Because, honestly, you could argue that pretty much anything coming out of Purah's mouth should be fully voiced given the circumstances, given how integral she is in pushing you along to the next objective.
And I just feel like it's used a bit too sporadically, especially when this is Nintendo's first $70 release.
I did not pay $70 for it. I waited until it was slightly lower than that.
Yeah, because all this wasn't enough. I want Rauru to say the word milk.
This is a joke, right? What is this?
Finally, something worth $70. Well, those were all my complaints about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
Wait, why do we have 5 minutes left then? Where are you going with this now?
Oh my god! So the final boss here is actually pretty good. We have a difficult and tactful sword fight with Ganondorf, requiring good reflexes via flurry rushes and parries.
I brute forced this as you saw on stream.
Took a while to get it down, but when I finally did, it was an incredibly satisfying confrontation, leading
I just brute forced it because I could.
Into the final phase, which was bitch and piss easy, but was a cool and memorable experience nonetheless. But I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about the lead up to it. See, when you're ready to take on Ganondorf, you have to find him in the depths of Hyrule Castle, where every enemy lurking down there in the environment itself is soaked in gloom, which is a substance in the depths that will make some of your hearts unusable until you return to an area with natural light, which you ain't getting that on the road to the boss, so you have to be unbelievably careful, avoid enemy encounters if possible, watch where you step. That's all fairly doable.
Or you make landmarks or you find other ways to get around it, such as finding specific materials that will dispel the gloom, or you figure out how to put down your own landmark to at least have a checkpoint along the way. There's ways to cheese this, and that's arguably the biggest issue one might have with this game, is that it's a little too easy to cheese. Again, going with my overarching issues with open world games, they are incredibly difficult to get right in terms of game balance because the developers can't guarantee what level you'll be at, to where by the time I tackled this, I could cheese it.
Until this
entirely
section where you have to fight dozens of enemies all covered in gloom. Well, you're surrounded by this stuff, but it's too dark to realize you're standing in it until it's too late. So when
It's called cheese and brute force, both of which I was able to do, which is part of the problem.
Finally get past this section, boom, 3 hearts. I spent dozens of hours trying to get as many hearts as possible to take on Ganondorf, and what did that amount to?
Not getting enough supplies ready.
You see that? It's nothing. So
It's your blue screen.
Surprisingly, that's all fine and good. You know, I appreciate a good challenge, but it became obvious to me this was a journey I had to better prepare for. I discovered there were meals you could cook that restored hearts taken away from gloom. There were some that made you resistant towards gloom. Great stuff. I'll probably have to go through the whole journey again. Fine. I don't wanna, but I...
You didn't find the set your own waypoint power, did you? I think that's somewhere on the... What's it? What was it? I think it was something from Robbie that you unlocked, but I can't remember exactly how you unlock it.
I guess it's my fault for not preparing, even though I didn't know what to prepare for. But you can't leave this area. You're stuck there. The game expects you to go through with the whole Ganondorf fight, even if...
Well, there is a point of no return, and you had crossed it. I think it's right before the giant army.
If you got whittled down to 3 hearts, the only way to leave is by reloading a previous save file, then travel to a different location, make some meals to help yourself, redo this entire section, then alright, I'm back at the boss. Let me get rid of those...
I mean, you guys saw my attempt at this. I went in prepared.
Those gloom hearts, let me apply some gloom resistance, and in Ganondorf's 3rd phase, he just flat out removes hearts. It's fine. It's fine. It's not fine, but it's fine. Okay, now those were all my complaints about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
Okay, where are you? Oh yeah, I see the bit now. Fair enough.
I wish Zelda was spelled with a Q.
Alright, I mean, we could be here all day because Tears of the Kingdom isn't perfect. Much like every game ever made.
Which is arguably why you went with that title, because it's very easy to defend.
And while I find Tears of the Kingdom to be more imperfect than many other games, those imperfections are the end result of a game that has done so much that no other game could even dream of doing. Throughout it all, my opinion of this game has definitely went up and down a bit. While I was always enjoying it, sometimes I found it to be an incredible, one-of-a-kind experience, while other times I found it to be too derivative of Breath of the Wild, with some elements not coming together as tightly as I would have expected and wanted. But in the end, I mean, I played this game for over 100 hours. It's
well, you put in more time than me, I'll grant you that.
Obviously become one of my favorite games of all time. The issues I had with it are still issues for the most part. And
yeah, and favorite doesn't necessarily mean best either, fair enough.
I can totally understand why they would drag many a player down, and how some players just didn't find anything special about this game. And they're not wrong! It's Breath of the Wild again, with some new abilities, a sky that has nothing to do in it, and depths that feel like auto-generated areas to grind materials in. But for me personally, while I felt a lot of this at some points, I ended up seeing how the game kinda expects you to feel that way. Part of the magic of Tears of the Kingdom is re-experiencing the world of Breath of the Wild in an entirely new way that initially feels only subtly different. But man, pop that game back in and you'll see, like, these games are so similar, but so damn different at the same time.
Yep. It was actually kind of funny, because I was thinking, as I was preparing for my Tears of the Kingdom video, hang on, did I just go in with the completely wrong mindset? And then as I'm playing Breath of the Wild, I'm thinking, nope, it wasn't just, okay, nope, it wasn't just my mindset, holy crap, yeah, back to Tears of the Kingdom, nope.
Just moment to moment, traversing the map is night and day comparing the two. What Nintendo was able to accomplish with this was a sequel that reused so much, but introduced such meaningful additions, tweaks, and differences, so it stands on its own compared to its predecessor. I don't think this replaces Breath of the Wild, it complements it. It helps you appreciate the world so much in new ways. It's such a unique feeling from a game that initially seemingly wasn't unique in the slightest. And that's how a game I don't think is perfect ended up being one of my favorite games of all time. And that should mellow out our voicemails a bit.
Nope.
Hey, Scott.
Again, you don't need this bit, but we've been over that. Someone's having way too much fun with this bit. Just start screaming already. Come on, you know you want to. Or just do a hard cut to your whatever title screen or thanks for watching screen you've got.
Well, there's only two ways to get out of
okay, fine. Or do nothing.
this continuous hell. Either apologize and have everybody critique my apology, which boils down to how well I can lie while writing an apology, or I ruin my reputation entirely, so then instead of people telling me I'm wrong, they disregard me entirely.
Or stand by your arguments and don't need to apologize. You don't... It's not like you were accused of impropriety, man. Come on.
Didn't work.
Alright, fine. I'll give you that one. Alright. There's a reason for covering that instead of the other thing you suggested, chat. Alrighty. There we go. Interesting video. A lot of fair points brought up. Some that I disagreed with, but that's to be expected, given that I have a weird take on Breath of the Wild myself. And Tears of the Kingdom. So, there we go. That should suffice for tonight, I believe. Is there anything that I missed from chat among all this? Because I've done all of the usual channel update stuff, so I guess to briefly summarize. So, I don't have a clear idea for when the next video response will be, as my current focus right now is on a video essay I mentioned in the first one I had done. So, that should give me some time to figure out what I want to do for the next one. See what weird take comes out around then. But, till then, that should be all. We'll be back to usual, well, business as usual next week. So, the plan there is I still have a lot of stuff to get through with Xenoblade 2, so those Let's Play videos will continue on a pace. I've gotten further along with Baldur's Gate 3. I spent this past week wrapping up my playthrough of that, and holy crap. It's actually kind of funny because I needed to basically cordon off all of Tuesday and Thursday for it because I left the biggest stuff for last of, oh, I need to go deal with this House of Hope thing where I have to go into a different plane and go grab something very specific in order to follow a particular thread. Yeah, alright, I'll be out in and out in a couple hours, right? No, 4. And then I have nothing but, and then I have Raphael's final act just on repeat throughout my head literally the rest of the week. So, then after that I'm thinking, okay, I know I'll need to spend a lot of time on the final battle. I know this is going to be a lot, so we'll handle it as we need to, right? Handle it as we need to. 5 hours later! Ugh. Good thing I started when I did, or I would have been up very bloody late. So, I'm at least done with the playing portion of Baldur's Gate 3. I just need to edit together a couple of things. So, with what I have left, I believe... Let me see... Where's the calendar? Okay, so... Next one's going to be Gortash, and it's... Yeah, okay, so... What's gone up? I think next is Gortash on the 27th, House of Hope on the 3rd, Final Battle on the 10th, and Aftermath on the 17th. After that, we'll be moving Xenoblade 3 over to weekday streams at the same time and starting point as I've been doing for the Baldur's Gate 3 stuff, just to give some variety to the channel. And Saturday is going to be taken up by a shorter game. So I guess short version of that, at least for now then. I did reach the credits on Xenoblade 3, but there's still DLC and post-game to see too, so next week we will be continuing on that. So, originally I was wondering if I should just leave it be for a while until Baldur's Gate 3 was done, but then as I was pondering the ending, I realized, hang on a minute. I thought I had a good idea of where the DLC campaign is going. Because they had mentioned a couple of the characters involved in the past. But... So presumably, it would focus on something in the past, right? But then I realized, hang on, with where the game ended, those two characters are at this point, at this time. Huh. That's about as vague as I can be without spoiling it, but, This is probably gonna take place there instead, isn't it? That would be the more interesting place for it to take place and would line up better with what I've seen from the DLC trailer. Okay. Message received. I want to see where this goes now, so I won't be able to jump right back into it as chat has demanded that I see to a bit more in the post-game first. But, still, Xenoblade 3 will continue on, as will Xenoblade 2 for the next year at this rate, but still, either way, plenty to look forward to over the next few weeks, or at least plenty to keep this channel occupied. Apart from that, let's see, we've got the video essay I mentioned that I'll be working on. Let's see, video response whenever I find something worth responding to, honestly. Again, the initial video responses were something I had done somewhat on a whim, the initial one anyway, and then it got a lot more attention than I expected. And so it's been a matter of, okay, let's experiment with this. We'll go after, well, we'll do a couple videos on people that I think I'd have something interesting to say on, and seems like that has borne out in the, well, with the viewership. So, you know what? I'd be a fool not to lean into this, and it's interesting to make this kind of content for me, which I didn't expect, honestly, given the circumstances, but still, interesting stuff. I'm in a very interesting situation with this channel where, now, I'd originally made it to cordon off Let's Plays from the review channel, and now this channel has more subscribers than same. Oh man, never know how the world's gonna work, huh? Never know what's gonna happen. But either way, I greatly appreciate the support regardless. I basically paid my gas bill for the next couple of months, which I'm very grateful for. But apart from that, yeah, not much to say beyond that, I suppose, so we'll go ahead and call it there. So, looking at the immediate schedule then, it'll be the usual Xenoblade 3 on Tuesday, the usual Baldur's Gate 3 on Thursday, and then we'll be back to Xenoblade this time next week. Although, I'd usually be asleep by this time next week, but you get the point. Apart from that, next video for what most of you have subscribed for, whenever I can get it done. I'm currently working through audio editing on a video essay. It's probably going to take me another month at the rate I'm going. I'd guess late April, early to mid-May is what I think late April is what I'm targeting right now. That should be doable at this point. So, we'll see how that plays out. So, I think that's all that needs to be said, so we'll go ahead and go through chat real quick. Make sure that I've attended to everything that was happening while I was attending to this video, and we'll be on our way. So, I hated the parts of Zelda that were too puzzle-based. Some of those dungeons were just back and forth repetitive. I'd be curious to know which dungeon specifically you're referring to, because the dungeons are actually the highlight for me. But then again, I come from a strategy game and RPG niche where I like the puzzle-solving aspect of same. Let's see. One FPS gang on top. I'm assuming that's with respect to the performance. The first Fire Emblem with full voice acting was Echoes. That's unsurprising. Brute Force always the answer, yeah. I want that DK64 video someday. I'll probably pre-record it offline. In case, well, as a backup. Since that it is a 45-minute video. I mean, you saw how long it took for me to get through a 30-minute video on a subject I'm familiar with, so to be fair, I'm not as familiar with the topic you were wanting me to look at, so still. I wonder when there will be Sonic 06? Never. I hope. I'm assuming. Okay, so this is in reference to the DK64 video. Hope it comes out by next year. We shall see. And then there's another comment about someone wanting me to play Sonic Colors DS. If you want me to suffer with a Sonic game, I have a better idea than that, but, well, I don't want to say too much yet. We'll do the post-game heroes next week. They're best done before the DLC. Yep, that was what I mentioned earlier. The short game, the only short and chill game I know is Elden Ring. I have it installed on Steam right now, but I'm not going to say. I was tempted to just briefly flash the Steam page on screen, but you know what? I'm not even going to do that. We're just going to keep it completely hidden for now. Completely hidden. Let's see. 16 decades later. Okay, referring to when I look at the video. Sonic Freeriders? Actually, what system is that one on? Actually, which one is that on? Actually, I should be careful opening that on this page. It doesn't have an ad blocker on it. Well, on this browser. Okay. When did this one come out? 2010 on what platforms? 360 only? Really? Only 360? That's a rare one. Is there even a good 360 emulator? Actually, now I'm curious. I mean... Okay. Interesting. So there is one available. Okay. Well, I guess to tease something a little bit, now that once that I'm able to... Oh, it's Kinect based? Oof. That's going to make things fun. So I guess then to tease something real quick. My plan with the game streams is that since I've made the move to Linux, yes, I've mentioned that. How do you know someone uses Linux? They'll tell you. Yes, I'm effectively a vegan now when it comes to software. But something I was thinking about is that, hey, I'm making that video seeing, well, for the review channel, seeing, okay, how much of my game library actually holds when I try and run it on Linux. But I'm thinking the next logical step would be to see how well an emulator would hold up. I think that would be the next logical step. It's just a matter of, okay, I just need a good game that I could test running through the entirety of it to get a sense for how difficult it is to set up, what's available, and all that fun stuff, because that'd be the fun part, and I can make a show of doing so live as well. So I think I've got a few picked out already for specific consoles and whatnot, but that one's not on my list, Lou. I'll have to consider that one later. Still, for now, I could go back and forth on this conversation for a bit, so best thing I can do now is just to call it here. So, yeah, I've seen everything that I need to, said everything I need to, so hopefully this was entertaining for you, as something different from my usual. If you have any suggestions for what I should react to live, or just pre-record for whenever I'm not able to make a stream night, or if you have something that you'd recommend I look at for a response video, link to a Discord in the description where you can post the video, or post your ideas and whatnot. Bear in mind that it's a lot of, you know what, no need to give a qualifier. Feel free to post what you like. Bear in mind that I do have to abide by Discord's TOS, so just be mindful of that. I'm so close to the 4-hour mark, well, too bad, I'm cutting it off now. So, either way, that's where we'll call it. So, thank you all for stopping by. I hope this was as entertaining for you as it was for me. Well, so, till next time, I'll see you all later. Take care.